Thank you. So we are live. Um, I'd like to welcome everyone, members, officers, and members of the public to this meeting of the Planning Control Committee. Obviously, particularly the members of public who've taken the trouble to come in tonight. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to explain how proceedings will work.
Good evening. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When the public participants are invited to speak, their microphones will be made live by the committee officer. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room, and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? Right, I will now hand back to the chair.
Thanks, Robbie. Okay. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have no apologies for absence. No apologies have been received. Item 2, minutes of the meeting the 7th of August 2025. I propose that we take as read and approve the minutes of the meeting held on 7th of August 2025 as a true record of proceedings. May I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mantle. Are there any comments on those minutes? In which case, if we could move to a vote to approve them, those in favour of approving the minutes.
That motion is carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. And we've established that the voting system works as well. Always helpful. Item 3, notification of other business. There is none. Item 4, Chair's announcements. 1, recording. In accordance with Council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available both on the Council's YouTube channel as well as on the Council's ModGov site alongside the documents from this meeting. 2, declaration of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcement on the agenda. Item 3, to clarify matters for the registered speakers. Thank you to the members of the public for joining us this evening. To confirm, for items 7 and 8 of tonight's meeting, you will have between 3 and 5 minutes, as advised by the committee services team, to make your verbal presentation to the committee. I've agreed to an extension to the speaking time for item 6 following a request received. Given the points raised in the request, I've agreed that the member advocates and the applicant's agent will have 7 minutes each, and the public objectors will have 3 minutes 20 seconds each. In making this decision, I've considered the other business on tonight's agenda and the impact that failure to consider these items would have on the agendas of this committee going forward, as well as specific matters relating to the application itself. All speakers will receive a warning when you have 1 minute remaining and at the end of your allotted time, and you'll be advised when the time has ended. I will do so gently, I promise. During the meeting, members of the committee will be invited to ask questions or points of clarification of the planning officer or public speakers. Please note this section is only for members of the committee, the councillors in the front row here, to ask questions, and unfortunately, members of the public cannot speak at this time. Item 4, debate procedure. In order to move to a debate on an item, we will require a proposer and seconder for a motion at the appropriate time in the meeting. This should take into account the information in the officer's report and will follow the officer's presentation and any public presentation, including member advocates, as well as any questions of the officer and points of clarification from the public presenters. As a reminder for members, should you wish to propose a motion contrary to the recommendation included in the officer's report, you will be required to provide clear and evidence reasons for this proposal. Section 5. mouthful this one. Section 4.8.23a. For the purposes of clarification, in order to vote on an agenda item at the meeting, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration of that item. If a member leaves the room at any point of the item, they will not be able to vote. 6. Withdrawal of item from agenda. Agenda item 9, 24-01-994-S73, land between Royston Road and Cambridge Road, Barkway, Hertfordshire, has been withdrawn from the agenda due to the application being withdrawn by the applicant. 7. Meeting cut-off. As outlined under 4.8.24g of the Council's Constitution, if the meeting proceeds to 10:30 p.m, the item being considered at that time will be the final item considered at tonight's meeting. The remaining business will be deferred to the next meeting on Thursday, the 18th of September. Public participation. For item 6, I have Richard Jameson. Thank you. Oliver Neves. Thank you. Julie Dunthorne. Thank you. Councillor Matt Barnes. Councillor Tim Johnson. And Catherine Else. Thank you. For item 7, I have Tim Wise. Tim, and Simon Warner. Thank you. And for item 8, I have Scott Moore. Thank you, Scott. So item 6, I think this is main on the billing. Right, application 21000765OP, land off Barkway Road and north of Flint Hall, Barkway Road, Royston, Hertfordshire. If I may ask Peter Ball to present. Peter.
Thanks, Chair. So there's an outline application for residential development of up to 280 dwellings, including affordable housing, with all matters reserved except for access, which is to be taken from Barkway Road, green infrastructure, including public open space, landscape boundaries, and SUDs. So there are a number of additional matters to draw members' attention to. These are mostly set out in the written addendum to the main report, which was published this morning. I will provide a short verbal update on the addendum and some other key issues relating to the application before we begin the slide presentation. In addition to the matters set out in the addendum, there are a number of further matters to draw members' attention to. Firstly, Natural England has provided a written response. It has confirmed that it is satisfied that the proposed development is unlikely to have a significant adverse impact on Thurfield Heath SSSI and has no objection to the application. However, it has recommended that a recreation management strategy is secured as part of the outline permission. Members are asked to provide delegated powers to officers to draft an appropriately worded condition to secure this. Secondly, Herts County Council Growth and Infrastructure Unit, their monitoring fee is incorrectly reported as £340. It should be £420. Thirdly, Sport England has provided a further response this afternoon in relation to cricket need. It confirms that the assessment report forming part of the emerging playing pitch strategy indicates that Royston Cricket Club was one of the few cricket clubs in the district that did not respond to the survey, which was sent out in the summer last year to all cricket clubs to get their views on facility matters. The council's consultants' assessment has therefore been based on their site visit and data available online and input from the county cricket boards, and would not have accounted for the views of the club. The emerging strategy document does not recommend any capital projects for any cricket sites in the East Analysis area covering Royston. As based on the research undertaken, a need was not identified, but this would not appear to have accounted for the Royston Cricket Club's views. A case may therefore exist for a financial contribution to be used towards a project like cricket practice nets or enhancements to the pavilion at the cricket club site. But a need for such a project would need to be verified by the council's consultants and the Herts and Cambridgeshire cricket boards. Plus, it would need to be confirmed that there is potential to deliver such a project at the club site. The financial contribution that would be recommended, if a contribution was to be secured, would be £61,620, which is the cost of meeting the demand in the playing pitch calculator provided by Sport England. If members were so inclined, this matter could be delegated to officers to resolve in consultation with the chair and the aforementioned organisations, including the cricket bodies, to reach an informed position on the actual contribution, which should not exceed £61,620. Fourthly, the applicant has given the council formal notification of its intention to lodge an appeal with the planning inspectorate and request the inquiry procedure. The applicant's planning consultant can provide further information as necessary. Finally, an additional objection has also been received from a resident restating reasons why the proposal is unacceptable. These reasons are already set out in the published report. So turning briefly to the addendum and the application, an outline, and this is an outline application with all matters reserved except for means of access. The remaining reserved matters, scale, layout, appearance and landscaping, would be dealt with in future reserved matters applications. Members are considering an in-application master plan as part of the proposal now presented. Details of this are set out at the formative part of the report. Conditions are recommended to secure particular technical matters. These, together with the master plan, will guide the details of future reserved matters applications. As set out in the written addendum, clarifications have been provided relating to the existing power line in the western parcel of the site, the consideration of the master plan by project board and access matters to the existing urban area adjacent to the western parcel. Clarification as to the number of representations from neighbours, press notices and the responses from the conservators of Thurfield Heath and Greens are also updated. Matters relating to open space and sports facility impacts are clarified. The Section 106 contribution for rugby union is amended to reflect the emerging sports pitch strategy. There is clarification and updates relating to recommended conditions 9, design matters, and 29, off-site highway improvements. Set out in the published report, in the event that members resolve to approve the application, delegated powers for officers to deal with the final wording of conditions is requested. That completes the update. We can turn to the slides now, please. So this is the submitted location plan with the site edged in red. The site is located immediately south of the existing built-up area of Royston off the Barkway Road, also known as the B1039. Next slide, please. This is the proposed vehicle access drawing, again off the B1039, which will serve the development. Next slide, please. The development will deliver a range of off-site highway improvement works on the B1039, including a refuge island and new bus stops, and these are illustrated on this drawing. Next slide, please. This is an aerial photograph of the site. Of particular note is the bridleway in green, separating the two field parcels, the public footpath in the eastern parcel, illustrated in purple, and the public footpath through the green walk plantation and the existing tree belts along the site boundaries. Next slide, please. This is a submitted access parameter plan illustrating the different access types and points for the site. This is also appended to the published report. Next slide, please. This is the submitted developable area plan, brown being development and green being open space. This is also appended to the published report. Next slide, please. This is a copy of the illustrative site layout from the master plan, a copy of which was also appended to the published report. Next slide, please. A range of highway mitigation measures are recommended to be secured as part of the permission, and these are illustrated on this drawing. A copy of this plan has also been appended to the original published report. Next slide, please. This is a drawing from the master plan illustrating the change in levels and the topography across the site, the northern end being approximately 15 metres lower than the southern end. Next slide, please. This is the view of the Greenwalk plantation immediately as you leave the western parcel of the site in the northwestern corner. Next slide, please. This is existing pedestrian access into the plantation from towards Shrubbery Grove. It's a continuation of the previous footpath picture. Next slide, please. This is the existing pedestrian access into the plantation from Shrubbery Grove. Next slide, please. This is the view from the western parcel looking along the northern boundary on the left of the site from the plantation edge towards Grange Bottom. Next slide, please. This is the view from the western parcel adjacent to Grange Bottom looking southwards. This gives you appreciation of the change in topography. Next slide, please. This is the view from the western parcel adjacent to Grange Bottom looking along the northern boundary on the right. That's the hedge of the site towards the Greenwalk plantation. Next slide, please. This is the view from Grange Bottom, illustrating the existing pedestrian access to the western parcel. Next slide, please. This is the view from the bridleway, trees to the left of the photo, looking northwards across the eastern parcel. Next slide, please. This is the eastern parcel looking along the southern boundary adjacent to the existing farm access track. This is the eastern parcel looking south to north. Note the existing residential development very far in the distance on this slide, and the existing hedge to the right, which is the B1039. Next slide, please. This is Barkway Road, B1039, leaving the built-up area looking south. Note the existing pedestrian access to the eastern parcel to the right of the photo. Next slide, please. It's the view along Barkway Road, showing the approximate location of the proposed main vehicular access and highway improvements. Next slide, please. This is a section taken from the master plan illustrating how the built form could look in the western parcel. Next slide, please. This is a section taken from the master plan illustrating how the built form could look in the eastern parcel. Next slide. And to complete the presentation here is again a copy of the illustrative site layout plan from the master plan, which can be found at Appendix 7.1 of the published report. Thank you, Chair. That completes the presentation.
Thank you, Peter. I should also remind the members present before I ask them if they have any questions. We also have from Herts County Council Highways Department, we've got Roger Flowerday in the corner, and from North Herts Senior Transport Officer Edward Lee in attendance as well. So additionally, if you have questions for them. So do you have any questions, points of clarification for Peter Bull or the other officers? Councillor Ruth Brown, I think you were quickest off the mark. Or was Martin?
I don't know, but thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to ask, just to be clear, this is an outline planning application with all matters reserved except access, but then in the proposal it says includes green infrastructure, open space, landscape and boundaries and SUDs. I'm a bit confused by that. I know the master plan is obviously included as part of the determination, but can you clarify that for me, please? And what about S106? Is that part of what we're determining tonight as well?
Thank you. So the master plan is obviously an illustrative layout for the site, so it's not fixing anything other than the access. So essentially what is presented to members tonight is the red line and the access drawing for the site, including those highway improvements. So whilst the master plan essentially will secure, and we have conditions to secure the master plan, the other elements that you mentioned will be delivered at the reserved matters stage, the details of those.
Thank you for that response. So essentially the green infrastructure, public open space and the SUDs will be part of the master plan at a late, but they're part of the master plan, but it will be agreed at a later date is what you're actually saying. So it's the site and the boundaries of the site and the access is what we're determining tonight.
That's correct. We have an in-application master plan. So you are considering that. That is set out in the report. And as part of the considerations and the conditions that set out, we are securing the master plan as a document that the future reserve matters will be tested against. So there are further stages that we must and you will need to look at.
Thank you. I think I'm clear on that now. Just one further question. The Bidding Green Walk was added, wasn't it, into the red line at some stage? It wasn't in the original application, I think. I understand Green Walk's owned by the town council. Have there been any discussions as to whether the town council have agreed in principle to release that land? Can someone ask that for me?
Yeah, certainly. So the town council were present at site meetings where we discussed the proposal to route the active travel route through the plantation. They were made aware of it. I'm not aware. You would need to ask the applicant about the actual agreement if there's anything in place at this stage.
Thank you, Peter. I have Councillor Prescott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, there is just one vehicular access to this development.
There is one access serving the development. There is a secondary access which will be used for emergency purposes only, and that is conditioned as such as part of the recommendation that's before you.
So just one access for anybody that's liable to live there or any visitors, delivery vehicles, anything other than emergency vehicles, just one access route. Right.
Yes.
So thank you very much for the presentation and also the photographs of the B1039. But I think the significant part, looking at the map as I am, of the B1039 is not the bit outside the development, but the bit heading down into Royston. It's a bit of road that I use fairly frequently. It's, as you know, it's a very restricted road. Do you have any photographs of it?
I don't have any photos for you tonight, no.
So I don't know if members of the committee are particularly familiar with that, but I do think it's very significant in that it is effectively one of only two ways of getting in and out of the development, either down the 1039 into Royston or further on into Flint Cross. And we'll come back to that later on. But I do think, with respect, it's a significant omission to not have any photographs of that access route. Just a point I'm making. Thank you.
Okay. And I will remind members we're asking questions at this stage, but I'll let that go, Martin. Councillor Louise Peace.
Thank you, Chair. Could you or possibly the highways officers clarify where the speed limit of 30 miles an hour will start at the development?
Edward, thank you.
Yes, certainly. So the proposal is that the speed limit will be moved east to effectively southeast of the access. So it'll move further out beyond the point of the vehicular access.
Does that answer your question, Louise? Thank you. Councillor Bryony May.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Prescott's question and comment earlier, I was wondering whether the highways officer, and thank you for being here in person, we really appreciate it, could say a bit more about the traffic analysis and the modelling that was done, specifically on the Barkway Road. So I'm looking at section 4.3.117 of the officer's report, and it bullet points all of the different locations of the traffic analysis that was done, but I cannot see where the Barkway Road between Limekiln close, and the A10 gyratory is included in that. So I'm hoping you might be able to say a bit more about the analysis of that bit of road and also the modelling that was done to support this application.
Yes, I can cover that one off. So effectively, so the modelling is not our modelling. Just want to make that clear. That's obviously modelling that's provided to support the planning application, and we review that modelling. Typically, when you're assessing the impacts of kind of traffic on a network, the main locations you're looking at is the junctions. So in effect, what you've got there is a list of the junctions that are impacted by the development. The wider area would have been assessed, but it wouldn't have been specifically modelled in terms of a junction, because it isn't a junction, it's a link. So you can't model the link, you can only model the impact on the junctions. So it's not to say that it wasn't taken into consideration as part of the analysis that when we were reviewing the transport modelling, but it wasn't a specifically modelled intervention.
Sorry, Bryony, you wish to come back?
Yeah, thanks for that response. I suspect we might talk a bit more about that in the debate. The other question I've got for the highways officer is around how the incline of both Barkway Road and the also for the other officers, the non-vehicular routes are built into the calculations around mode shift. Because obviously the distance and time it takes to get, say, from the new development to the railway station is taken into account, but not necessarily the incline of the hill, because it's Barkway Road's quite a steep hill. So it'd be interesting to know how that is taken into account in terms of time, particularly because obviously going into Royston, it would take less time. In fact, it would probably be quicker than what you might estimate, but coming back out, it's obviously not going to be an average amount of time because of the steepness of the hill.
Thank you, Councillor. It is a fair point, and I think there was some scepticism of the journey times that were included in the transport assessment addendum. We did discuss that as to whether that was significant or not. The reality is that the applicant has not made an unrealistic assumption about the mode share. So in other words, it has basically taken the site to behave like other sites in Royston in terms of the mode shares that people will choose. Nevertheless, we have worked with the applicant to ensure that there is a safe and reasonably attractive cycle route via the Shrubbery Grove link, which is less hilly than the route via Barkway Road, which, as you rightly point out, is very steep and off-putting to most people who might consider cycling that way. So that's why we've invested with the applicant a lot of time and effort in establishing the viability of delivering a cycle route through that northwestern corner to Shrubbery Grove, and then investing in improving the cycle route along. So the footway along the A10 London Road would be widened to allow it to be shared use for cycling and walking, and then that would connect into the Warren. And then part of the Strand 2, so the sum of money that's left over to contribute to the kind of cumulative impact of the development, that would be used to improve the route to the pedestrian crossing, which would be upgraded, and then on into the town centre. So we are very aware that in order to make this site sustainable into transport terms, it needs a good active travel link, and that's what we've worked with the applicant to develop and to secure the funding for.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks. Yeah.
Councillor Louise Pearce, please.
So at 4.3.115, there's discussion of the travel times to Studland's Rise First School, and that's considered to be acceptable. But Studland's Rise only goes to 9 years old. So I understand that from year 5, any children living in the new dwellings would be going to King James Academy, which is a bit further away. Has any assessment been done of the travel times to that school?
I'm not sure who would like to pick that up. Edward.
So I don't actually believe the applicant did provide travel times to the secondary schools. We don't often ask for travel times. We ask them to look at, to make sure the route, that there is a route that's that's feasible and that's safe and reasonably attractive. And there are routes. They're not ideal, but they are acceptable. That's not to say that there wouldn't be some investment in improving them.
Thank you, Edward. Did you want to come back on that, Louisa?
Just a little bit. That's not a secondary school. It's a middle school. So the children would be slightly younger and probably wouldn't be going there under their own steam, possibly in year 5, as they would be to a secondary school.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Tyson. Tom.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was also going to raise the point that there seems to be an implication in the report that pupils at the first school would be cycling there, which I find a bit far-fetched, to be honest, at the age of 4. I was going to ask Edward about, just following up on the transport. I'm looking at SP9 and the paragraph C2 that says that the site should create integrated, accessible and sustainable transport systems with walking, cycling and public transport designed to be the most attractive forms of transport. And I just wondered if you, to what extent you agree that that would be the most attractive form of transport, or those options.
It's a fair question. It is quite a challenging site to achieve sustainable transport connection for all modes, particularly for bus. The current 18 bus service is not very frequent, and there isn't a bus service on the A10 London Road. So therefore, the focus has been on how to make the site accessible for active modes. It is within a reasonably comfortable walking distance to the town centre, less so to the railway station. But that is why we are seeking investment in improving infrastructure for cycling, to make cycling into the town centre and the railway station and the retail park to the north something that is feasible. There might be some scepticism about whether people will be choosing that. And as I say, the applicant hasn't made any unrealistic assumptions about the share of the travel that will be by those modes. But I think there is I don't think there is a long-term vision for Royston. Part of the reason that Royston is a sustainable travel town is to develop a coherent plan for improving sustainable modes within the town, and that particularly means active travel. So I'm confident that with funding from this development, we will improve accessibility to the town for active modes, and that it will be more attractive than existing parts of Royston for people to walk and cycle into the town centre.
Did you wish to come back on that at all?
Well, I just had a follow-up, really. Just I was curious about the active travel on the western side of the site, which would, as I understand what I've read, take you out of the site into Shrubbery Grove. And then if you were cycling, you would then have to go onto the A10 London Road, where there would be a shared surface with pedestrians going down into the town from there. Is there also, from the maps we saw earlier, is there also a footpath through the Greenway into towards Warren Road, but that's not suitable for cyclists?
That's correct. And I don't think the town council would be supportive of making that route suitable for cycling. In particular, introducing lighting all the way along would not, almost certainly not be acceptable, and I don't think it would make people feel safe. So we need to get people out onto Shrubbery Grove. From Shrubbery Grove, yes, they would need to cycle alongside the London Road A10 on an improved footway that exists now. There is plenty of width within the highway to achieve that, not beyond the Warren, which is why the path would lead into the Warren. The Warren itself is a relatively low traffic route, and then from the bottom of the Warren, the idea would be to have a cycle route that runs through what's currently a kind of bus station to what would be a parallel crossing or a toucan crossing, and then across, and we have discussed with members previously as part of the Sustainable Travel Town how we can introduce some infrastructure there to make it a safe cycle route to get across into Market Hill and then on from there into the town centre. So there is a plan that's kind of ready to be, for funding to be delivered there.
Thank
you. Councillor Prescott.
Thank you, Chairman. Coming back on a point that Councillor May started to develop again on traffic and access. If we assume that a certain proportion of the people are going to want to travel and are not going to want to be cycling or walking into Royston, travelling for work or whatever, they're either going to go north on the A10, which means they've got to go down Barkway Road into Royston or to the station, and they're just going to have to face the traffic there. If they want to go east, they have to get to the 505, and one must assume if the traffic is going to be challenging in the town centre and around the gyratory, they're going to probably go out through the junction with Barley and up to the Flint Cross junction with the 505. If they're going to go south on the A10, and again, assuming there's going to be challenging traffic on the gyratory, they're going to go out through Newsells Road and through the joint to the A10 that way. Has any modelling been done on any of those routes that are not immediately around the development, but that are clearly going to be impacted by the numbers of vehicles that are going to be emanating from the development? I'm sorry, that was a very long question, but you get my point.
I think the modelling that's been, sorry, Chair. Yeah. The modelling that's been undertaken has made the assumptions around where people are going. It's looked at where people are likely to go based on evidence of similar locations. So it makes an assumption as to where people are going to go. We then agree the junctions that is reasonable to assess the direct impacts based on the scale of the development that's proposed. By the time you get to a certain distance away from the site, traffic will naturally dissipate. The amount of vehicles going through certain locations will be significantly reduced. So the assumption at the moment in the peak period is that the majority of the traffic exits the site and goes towards Royston. So it goes in, it doesn't go out towards Barley Barkway, which is what I think most people would assume the traffic would do. That's the main destinations where people want to go in that direction, which is what you said. And then what we've done is the development has assessed the impact on the most likely impactable junctions, and it's identified mitigations that are commensurate with the impact it's causing. We have to be reasonable in terms of the extent that we require junctions further afield to be assessed. They need to be reasonable in terms of the scale of the impact that's likely to be caused.
Thanks, Roger.
Thank you. I appreciate your point about dissipation of traffic, but on the routes I've suggested to the 505 going east and to the A10 going south, it's hard to imagine how or where that traffic will dissipate to. And I know physically those junctions are a distance away, but they're unavoidable if you're heading in those routes. There's nowhere else to go.
I suppose the best way I can describe it is if you look at the modelling, the assumptions. So in the morning peak period, so the rush hour, it's anticipated that 153 vehicles will leave the site and turn towards Royston in the peak. So that represents one vehicle every 24 seconds. So in the scheme of things, once the further you get away from that junction, one vehicle every 24 seconds would be difficult to notice anyway. And the further you get away from there, i.e. it reaches a point and then some vehicles will go to the 505, some will want to go south on the A10. That number again, it reduces. So the scale of the impact, like I said, is by the time that gets to some of those junctions you're talking about, you can't model that impact. It's so small.
We're playing the light here. Councillor Ruth Brown. Ruth.
Just a really quick question of clarification, coming back to what Councillor Tyson was saying about the two ways, Green Walk and the Shrubbery Grove Way. Am I right in thinking that the Green Walk improvements will have steps on it? And is there a step-free access via Shrubbery Grove for cycles? Is that correct?
So the plan that you will see in the applicants that the applicant submitted, that does include steps. We have made clear that that wouldn't be acceptable, but we've taken the view that we can condition further work on that to achieve a step-free access. So what they haven't looked at is taking the path slightly further through the plantation and coming out at the point that Peter's slides showed, which is the current pedestrian access with which has a signboard inside. So we believe that it is possible to have a step-free access through to Shrubbery Grove, but that hasn't yet been demonstrated. We just
okay, and with reasonable gradients for cycling as well.
Yes, it won't, unfortunately, won't be possible to make something which is entirely compliant with LTM 120, which is the sort of gold standard. But it is accepted that if the applicant can demonstrate, or the circumstances require that something needs to depart slightly from those standards, then a view will be taken on whether that's acceptable. And if it's a trade-off between losing some trees or having a slightly steeper bit of path, then the choice would be to have a slightly steeper piece of path. But there are ways of designing it to make it so that it is more comfortable. By if you have a steeper bit, then you have a level bit to kind of rest, and that's how steep ramps are designed nowadays, with steep bits and then level bits to rest.
Okay, thank you.
I have no more names in front of me, so I think we're done for now. In which case, if we could move to our public speakers, may I ask Richard Jameson? Richard, you have 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and I'll let you know we have a minute left. Richard.
Okay, I'm grateful for the chance to represent the very large number of objectors to this application. There are very serious concerns on the unaddressed traffic issues in this submission. The developer's transport assessment is inadequate, it misrepresents facts, is riddled with errors and ignores existing issues that would negatively impact on the application. It makes unsubstantiated claims that the site is sustainable, assuming that many residents will walk and cycle. So I'll start with 3 simple facts that seem to have been ignored. 1, the site is on the top of a very steep hill. 2, it's far from the major amenities in Royston. And 3, it is accessible for traffic only by Barkway Road, which is single file due to parking, which highways have accepted cannot be addressed. So taking the issue of the hill, it's simply too steep for people to walk or cycle daily. And to me, by what was said, it doesn't matter which way you go, you still got to get to the top. So even if people did, the average speeds that have been assessed by the transport assessment and highways, I think, are far from what is realistically achievable as a cyclist myself. Secondly, the application focuses on cycle walkway journey times to the town centre, but the developer and highways have failed to recognise the major amenities in Royston, that's supermarkets, retail parks, trading estate, leisure centre, sports grounds, the largest employer, schools and the station, are north of the town centre, many close to 4 or 5 kilometres away, and outside the acceptable travel distance claimed by the developer, and that's even ignoring the issue of the hill. Therefore, the only logical conclusion can be that people will drive to and from the site. And this leaves the third fact that there will be an increase of more than 400 cars, plus the delivery drivers, etc., on a daily basis that will worsen the severe congestion on Barkway Road that already exists. Notably, Barkway Road, I think we've already discussed, wasn't assessed by the developer's transport assessment, nor have they modelled the impact of increased car journeys that will occur for the reason I've already outlined. And why not? Well, highways have stated that the single nature of the Barkway Road cannot be addressed, so perhaps it's not to be raised because they don't want to face this issue. The highways report, however, does recognise this. It stated that there is clear traffic problems will still exist and the queue on Barkway Street will still cause blocking past Barkway Road, and that's in their submission. And note, this is without any assumption on additional traffic, nor the new or other ongoing developments in the area. For example, the site in Barkway, which will use that same road to come into Royston. The developer has also misrepresented their discussions with highways, claiming in the transport assessment and promotional materials that a Pelican crossing on Market Hill will address traffic flow. I questioned this directly myself with highways, who replied, the upgrade of the A10 gyratory zebra crossing to a Pelican crossing is primarily required to improve the safety for all crossing users and not a solution to the existing travel problems presented in the applicant transport assessment. It's notable in the same correspondent, highways have recognised the safety issue of impatient drivers going onto the pavement of Barkway Road due to the congestion, yet say nothing can be done about this. So in summary, due to its location and proximity to major amenities, it is clear that people will drive, which will exacerbate the severe congestion, the pollution, and the risk to pedestrians on the single-lane Barkway Road and the age of A10 gyratory trunk road. And it should be refused for these reasons alone.
Thank you. And I indulged you a great deal at the end there.
Thank you very much.
So, did you want, I don't know who wants to, Stephen, can I ask you to, so we just before we move on, there's just one issue we want to clarify so we can move on.
I understand that Councillor Brown, is a member of Royston Town Council. Is that correct? Is there any reason why you didn't declare that?
I don't think it has any relevance to this, as I don't sit on the planning committee of Royston Town Council.
Okay. And Councillor May, as I understand it, on the register of interest, your spouse is listed as the chair and trustee of Royston Cricket Club.
My husband is, yeah.
Yeah.
Not me.
No, but there's sufficient linkage that I think that should have been a matter of declaration. Do you wish to comment?
I'm very sorry that I didn't declare that. I do apologise. I didn't see materially that that was an issue.
Can I invite anyone to indicate whether they feel that those are matters which should have been declared and therefore should rule out continued participation in this, or whether they're happy that the declarations have now been made?
May I comment from the chair? I mean, my position would be that the items have been declared now, unless you or someone else tells me that the member should withdraw. Do we? No.
No, if anybody has an objection to them continuing, can they please state it so I can consider? But as the chair has said, that those declarations have now been made, and my view is that the members should continue as part of the determination.
Thanks for clarifying. Ruth, did you want to say something?
So I wasn't going to raise it tonight because as far as I'm concerned, it's resolved. But since we're talking about it, I'm also a county councillor. I'm the Deputy Cabinet Member for Environment, Transport and Growth. But that's a strategic role, and I do not comment on any specific highways issues, nor have I been involved in any of the highways matters that relating to this application. Now, the reason I wanted to come to state that openly tonight is because at a previous meeting about Nebworth, I did suddenly think, is this a problem? And I declared it, and I didn't take part in the debate. Following that, the previous locum planning lawyer wrote to me and we discussed it, and we've agreed that it's not an issue because I do not specifically determine highways responses to these applications.
I'm conscious that having looked at that committee, you did make the declaration very early on in that committee. And unless there are any objections to Councillor Brown continuing, I think the declaration has now been made. And thank you for the clarification as to the other matters.
Thank you for that, Stephen. And I would stress there was no aspersions being cast at any councillors in the room. We do need to clarify these things, and thank you for Stephen and James for doing so. So I'm sure that members can remember the contribution from the speaker, since it's a long one. Sorry, this is that. So do we have any points of clarification for Richard Jameson from members of the committee? Councillor Prescott, of course.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry, I've already forgotten the gentleman's name. It's an age thing. I'm sorry. You mentioned very briefly, or you touched very briefly on the fact that you were a cyclist. I'm not a cyclist, clearly, but I would be interested to know, or a little bit of more expansion upon the hill and how difficult or not it is to cycle up and down it. Could you give me a little bit more detail on that?
Yeah, sure. I'm a road cyclist, getting on in age, so perhaps not as fast as I was, but that is a tough hill to go up. And if you ride from the bottom of Royston up Barkway Hill, it's a tough hill. And the average of 18 miles an hour that was claimed by the developer is just absolute nonsense. If I do 18 miles an hour on my bike on flat roads, I'm pleased. So going up a hill there is just nonsense. I could do it going down. That would be fair, but not going up. And it's just people won't ride. It's a tough hill, and you've got children, you've got elderly people. I assume they're going to live on this site. They're not going to go on a bike. I'm sorry. It's just nonsensical, which is why the claim of there being a sustainable site is just false.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further questions, points of clarification for this speaker? No. In which case, I'd like to. Oops, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Could you just say a bit more about what you asserted that Barkway Road between the Gyratory and the immediately before the Gyratory is effectively a single lane road. Could you talk a bit more about that and about the parts cars making it a single way road? Could you clarify that a little bit more?
It's to me?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, if anybody's driven up Barkway Road, they know. I mean, there's parking on both sides of the road at different places. There's various pinch points there that cause congestion already. And I was driving down there last night on the way to the Heath. I counted 4 cars that had driven onto the pavement because there was not enough room for 2 cars to get by. 2 pedestrians had to stop while those cars were maneuvering on the pavement there. So it's clearly it's a one-way road that right now is already putting pedestrians at risk, in my view.
Thank you. Right. No further questions? You sure, Ruth? Martin. And why did I ask? Martin Prescott.
Well, just for clarity, you said it was a one-way road, but it's not. It's a 2-way road, but it's a single track road, effectively.
Sorry, it's 2-way, but because the car's parked on there, it's 1 lane. So you've got 2 lanes of traffic going into 1 lane. Correct.
Thank you for providing your own clarification, Councillor Prescott. That was helpful. Right, in which case, if we're done, I will call the second public speaker, Mr. Oliver Neves. Oliver, you've got 3 minutes and 20 seconds.
Thank you. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today regarding the proposed development north of Flint Hall, Royston. My name is Oliver Neves and I'm a Fellow of the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation, as well as a Chartered Member of the Institute of Logistics and Transport, with over 2 decades of experience in transport planning. Our consultancy, Mayor Brown, has thoroughly reviewed the original 2021 transport submission and the revised 2025 submission. Our objective was to determine whether the concerns raised in the original assessment have been addressed or if they remain unresolved. Let me begin by highlighting our findings on the traffic data and modelling presented to support this application. The reliability of traffic data is crucial, as subsequent junction modelling depends on its accuracy. We note that the traffic surveys were conducted in December 2024. According to the Department for Transport guidance, this period just before the Christmas holidays should be avoided because traffic patterns are atypical. December is not considered a neutral month for traffic surveys. Furthermore, the actual survey data has not been made available, so it's impossible to verify whether the modelled queue lengths in the capacity assessments reflect real-world conditions. When we turn to the junction modelling, significant issues remain. The software used for modelling roundabouts and priority junctions is out of date, superseded since 2021 and now 2 versions behind. This point is also acknowledged by the highway officer in the consultation response. In particular, the modelling for the signalised junction at Baldock Street, Neesworth Street, Melbourne Street is flawed, as it assumes a lane length of 60 metres on Neesworth Street, whereas only 25 metres are available. This misrepresentation leads to a significant overestimation of the junction's capacity. When corrected, the impact of the development could be much more severe. HCC has also raised this in their consultation response. Additionally, the application demonstrates the A505 Baldock Road roundabout is currently over capacity with subsequent substantial queuing, an issue that will worsen if the development goes ahead. HCC has recognised this in their response. The same is true for the western arm of the A1198 A505 Old North Road roundabout, which is already
1 minute.
significantly over capacity and would further deteriorate post-development. Most concerning is the impact on the A10 gyratory. Both HCC and our team have found that the applicant used inappropriate modelling software for this location. HCC lists several issues, including unaccounted delays caused by the one-way working on Barkway Road as a result of on-street parking. HCC have not provided an opinion on the acceptability of the impact on the gyratory in their response, as the provided information is insufficient for a thorough assessment. It's clear that only a microsimulation model would allow the committee to understand the full impact, but this essential work has not been undertaken. Given these substantial shortcomings in both the survey data and junction modelling, we conclude that the cumulative effects on the local highway network could be severe. In our view, the proposal does not meet the requirements set out in paragraphs 115D and 116 of the MPPF. In conclusion, while the April 25 Transport Addendum has resolved some earlier issues, it's vital that all mitigation proposals are based on robust, up-to-date data, accurately reflecting the current road network, and should fully account for safety and operational effectiveness. Only with these principles in place can the committee make an informed decision that both supports sustainable development and protects the interests and safety of the local community. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. May I ask the members of the committee, do you have any points of clarification from the member of the public? Louise, please.
You said something about the modelling allowing 60 metres length on a road rather than 25. Could you just expand on that and explain that a little bit more, please?
Yes, of course. So on the Neesworth approach to that signalised junction, it's one lane that splits to two lanes. The models show that both lanes are 60 metres long, which would allow for both right turners and left turners to fill those sort of lanes before when the lights go green, they can all disperse over the stop line. But actually, the lanes are only 24 metres long each, which means that the capacity available for right turners is essentially blocked as the left turn queues are longer, which means that as the lights go green, less traffic will be able to pass the stop line than the model would show.
Thank you. Councillor Briney-May.
Thank you. With the expertise that you have, could you say a bit more about what modelling might be done on the Barkway Road between basically the top of the hill and the A10 gyratory that you don't feel has been done in the analysis so far?
Yes, of course. So this situation can only be correctly modelled using microsimulation modelling, such as Vissim or Paramix software packages, where you could set out this exact arrangement as well as the gyratory and model it as a whole junction. So it would model the interaction between both the gyratory and that sort of single way working section as one piece of work.
Councillor Valbryant.
Thank you. Some of my query has been answered because other councillors have asked similar questions. Can you make clear whether you have critiqued the junction modelling done by the applicant, or have you also done your own modelling? And if you've got the results of your own modelling, can I find them in the papers? Can you point in the direction of them?
I can confirm we've not undertaken our own modelling, just the critique of the modelling provided. We wouldn't be able to undertake our own modelling without conducting sort of our own surveys and sort of quite that works. So yeah, it's just a critique of the modelling provided. We've not provided our own.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Brown, do you want to do your usual last minute? No? Sorry. In which case, definitely, yeah. In which case, if we can move to our third public speaker, Julie Dunthorne. Julie, you've got 3 minutes and 20 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. Julie Dunthorne, Chartered Development Surveyor. This 18.5 hectare, 45 acre speculative site is not allocated under the 2022 adopted local plan. It is also contrary to paragraph 12 of NPPF, which states that where there is a conflict with up-to-date local plan, planning permission should not normally be granted. Notably, on this major strategic application, the promoter has not provided supporting evidence in relation to flood risk, archaeology and noise. There's no environmental impact assessment under Schedule 3. The habitat survey is outdated and predicated on Phase 1 surveys conducted in October. The indicative master plan lacks credibility. There is no secondary access, no phasing plan, no construction plan, and so on. Turning to the tilted balance, the transport assessment is flawed. The conflict with paragraphs 115 and 116 of the framework alone are sufficient to justify a refusal, arising from the severe cumulative impacts on the road network. The transport assessment fails to factor in the impact of the single lane working along Barkway Road, underpinning the county highway's statutory objection in July 22. Critically, this road is relied upon for 98% of traffic flow towards the gyratory. The Highways Officer in 2022 noted an upgrade of the route for Barkway Road was unfeasible. No proposed resolution has been devised over 3 years to specifically address this existing shortfall. The site remains highly inaccessible. Instead, the applicant has sought to focus on sustainable travel through cycling and walking routes to mitigate vehicle movements. Whilst such routes are welcome, they do not provide a realistic alternative to vehicle transport arising from the topography. The site is effectively at the top of a hill. The average gradient is 1 in 10 on Barkway Road. This is benchmarked against as being twice as steep as the maximum gradients advocated by active travel and completely unfeasible. Inappropriate junction modelling and survey data collection in December rendered the transport assessment unreliable and invalid. The cumulative impact risk to the wider network would be severe once modelled correctly. In addition to the transport, the LVIA confirms that the site conflicts with local plan policy NE1 arising from the prominence and location. There's an undisputable loss of 45 acres of countryside. There will be a significant loss of local public amenity arising from the extinguishments of a number of public rights of way which are not shown on the plan. The environmental impacts, whilst not assessed, will be significant and irreversible. The highways mitigation measures proposed do nothing to alleviate concern. The original highways objection acknowledges the issues of Barkway Road are not capable of being mitigated and render severe consequences. The car share initiative proposed is voluntary and such measures are unenforceable without a car-free design.
You can finish your sentences.
I would strongly urge members to have regard to the significant cumulative impacts. The adverse effects significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, contrary to paragraph 14 of the framework. Please do consider whether it is appropriate to approve an application of this scale and magnitude at such an inaccessible, unsustainable and environmentally sensitive location, where the application is predicated upon invalid and unproven assumptions, coupled with omissions in substantive supporting evidence.
Thank you very much. Do I have any points of clarification for the public speaker? Councillor Val-Bryant.
Thank you. I picked up on the word archaeology because I've been reading the report earlier on, and on page 97 deals with the archaeology. Are you thinking of something else, or am I, in fact, if you've got
archaeological, to my knowledge, the full archaeological assessment has been deferred to the reserved matters stage.
Well, it says here before the phase element of the
It may
site,
have been a scoping
which
exercise.
is normal. Thank you.
Do we have any further points of clarification? No, right. In which case we'll move on to the member advocates. We have Councillor Matt Barnes and Councillor Tim Johnson. I think you're going to run through the 7 minutes. Is that correct? Divide the time up. Thank you.
Councillors, this is the wrong place to build this number of houses. this development will be detrimental to existing infrastructure and does not constitute sustainable development. This land is not in our adopted local plan and it is outside the town settlement boundary. This is a rural area which enjoys special protection under our local plan because, quote, it is necessary to impose restraints on development to prevent inappropriate schemes. Our local plan sets specific tests that proposed schemes like this one must meet before they can be deemed acceptable. This application meets none of those tests. Please think really carefully about this as you make your decision tonight. If you vote yes, you will be sending a clear signal that the protections that we put in place to defend our rural areas against inappropriate development do not matter. But they do matter. Our countryside matters. I want to talk to you about highways. I know that many of you are not familiar with Royston, so we'll set the scene. In the absence of a bypass, the A10 is the main north-south artery through the town. It is a major road, not just for Royston, but for anyone travelling through, from Cambridge into East Herts and beyond. The A10 gyratory is a strange section of the A10 close to the town centre, a bit like a roundabout, but not designed like one. It is narrow and confusing and highly sensitive to small increases in traffic. The A10 is regularly gridlocked at this location at peak times. Barkway Street connects to the A10 at the gyratory and Barkway Road climbs up a steep hill past several existing housing estates. The proposed development site, as you've heard, sits at the very top of this hill. On the lower section of Barkway Road is a row of Victorian terrace houses. Outside of these houses, a row of parked cars. These cars, parked entirely legally and with nowhere else to go, present a major obstacle to movement on a daily basis, forcing drivers in both directions to pull up and allow others to pass before they can carry on themselves. The geography and local road network are such that anyone living on the hill who wants to go to basically anywhere except Barley or Barkway must first travel down Barkway Road and then through the A10 gyratory before continuing their journey. The result is routine, significant and unavoidable congestion on Barkway Road as well as on the A10. If this development goes ahead, its residents will add to this problem. There are about 400 houses on the hill today. This application seeks to add another 280 to this total. That is 70% more houses and 70% more cars. This issue barely gets a mention in the officer report, and yet it is clear from the earlier speakers that the extent of this congestion has not been adequately modelled in the transport assessment. This has also been acknowledged by the highways officer this evening. And yet no further modelling or mitigations are proposed. This issue comes up over and over again in the public comments. Many of the people behind me or tuning in at home are here because they want you to understand that the current situation is already really bad. And they want you to recognise this development will make it far, far worse. For them, of course, but also for the people who might one day live in these houses. You've been asked to weigh this application on the assertion that the highway's impact will not be severe, but I ask you, how can you know that? At the very least, the lack of adequate modelling ought to be grounds for deferral to ensure that you get the right information and to think again about how to properly manage the impact of this development. Adding another 280 households into the existing travel system with the impact it will have in this location and on the A10 through route is simply unacceptable. I also want to address sustainable travel. Here too, the proposals fall short. On the eastern side, the new pedestrian crossings are necessary and welcome. However, the lack of separated cycleway on Barkway Road means that cyclists will be expected to on-road along the very stretch that I've just been talking about, creating scope for increased conflict between drivers, cyclists and pedestrians. On the western side, the transport assessment acknowledges that it is not possible to deliver a cycle path which meets LTN 120 standards. The transport assessment argues that this is acceptable because the route is primarily recreational. But if that is the case, then it cannot also be expected to have any meaningful impact during the commuter peak. Both things cannot be true at the same time. This is not like other sites in Royston. The proposed cycle route is so steep that the most recent designs require steps to be installed. There is a further problem of bats, which mean that lighting must be kept to a minimum. But it gets dark in winter. The idea that this path is suitable as a year-round active travel route which will have any meaningful impact on peak car movements is frankly absurd. I understand that Condition 34 attempts to deal with this issue by pushing a decision later in the process, but I firmly believe that approach is not good enough. This issue is fundamental to the viability of the western part of the site, and it needs to be resolved before outline permission is granted. The active travel proposals are further undermined by the assumption that the town centre will be the origin or destination of the majority of movements. Royston town centre is a wonderful historic place, but the reality is that many of the town's economic and social hubs are today located outside of it, as you've already heard. Travel distances from this site to these locations are roughly twice as long as the figures presented in the report. It's too far to comfortably walk and too hilly to comfortably cycle, so people will drive. The report also refers to buses, but the 18 stops just 4 times a day and the 27 only runs twice a week. The sum total of all of this is that the sustainable travel measures proposed will unfortunately add up to very little. The vast majority of movements will be made by car, and this will put even more pressure on Barkway Road and on the A10 gyratory. The impact of this development on the main north-south A10 route through the town and on all those using it will be severe. A car-centric development of this scale and in this location flies directly in the face of the NPPF Sustainable Travel Guidelines and cannot be allowed to proceed. Finally, Section 106. If, despite all of this, you're still inclined to support this application, please insist on financial contributions for hockey and for cricket. The assertion that there is no local need for these sports is not correct. The financial contributions for Furfield Heath SSSI mitigation are also well below the benchmark level and have not been endorsed by the conservators of the Heath, who are the custodians of the SSSI. They also maintain that Natural England was not properly consulted during this process. The impact on Furfield Heath is a material consideration and it has not been properly addressed, and I can provide more detail on that if needed. Look, I know that you're in a difficult position this evening, but I will say again, this is the wrong place to build this number of houses. This application is damaging to our countryside. It is contrary to our local plan. The highways impact modelling is deeply flawed and the sustainable travel measures add up to very little. The impact on a key section of the main route through Royston will be severe. This application does not meet the test laid down by the NPPF. Colleagues, this is not what sustainable development looks like. Please do not allow this application to go ahead. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson was expecting 30 seconds at the end. I think we stopped a bit soon, so I'm going to give 30 seconds for Councillor Johnson to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Very eloquent, Matt. Thank you. I'll be hard-hitting. The crux: parked cars, single-track road. It beggars belief that highways feel there will be no severe detrimental effect. Nice green lane pictures, no pictures of single-track parked cars. 153 vehicles every 24 seconds. What about the existing 400 houses? I'll sum it up, Chair. It's the wrong site and it'll be wrong-minded if approved.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. That was very succinct. Thank you. Right. Do we have any points of clarification from the member advocates? No? Right. In which case we'll move to the applicant's agent, Catherine Else. Catherine, you have seven minutes and I'll let you know when you've got a minute left. Your time.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and committee members. My name is Catherine Else of Claremont Planning and I represent the applicant Walsington 1 today for this application. Thank you for allowing me to present this evening. I will aim to explain the principles of this sustainable new neighbourhood and the benefits it will deliver to Royston. But firstly, the timing of this application should be explained, which is rooted to the local planning context and the lack of housing land supply. The applicant was not able to introduce the site to the local plan examination, so instead, an application was pursued to demonstrate the site suitability. The local plan was adopted on the basis of a plan review by the end of 2023, with focus on new housing need. This review is now underway and has to accommodate at least a 22% increase in housing growth, a sizable uplift. Given the scale of housing required, Royston will certainly need to accommodate more homes, especially as it is not in the Greenbelt. Given that growth of Royston is already constrained by Furfield Heath and the A505, the development proposes a sustainable opportunity for growth to the south. The council did not have a 5-year supply at the time of submission, only 2.2 years, so a significant shortfall. Despite the local plan adoption, the council still cannot demonstrate a 5-year land supply. The presumption in favour and tilted balance is engaged, and with no adverse effects arising, the benefits outweigh any impact. The homes proposed with 40% affordable, will contribute significantly to local needs and is a substantial benefit. The level of open space provided on site is also considerable, including a public park that exceeds the Fields Interest Standard with biodiversity net gain of 26% for habitats and 57% for hedgerows. Allotment provision will address local shortfall with new play spaces and walking routes to a degree that should also be considered of substantial benefit. The application was submitted in March 21 during the COVID-19 pandemic, following virtual public consultation that was begun in 2020 with the Town Council, ward members and the Highway Authority. Wider consultation with Royston involved a website, leaflets and social media. As the master plan has advanced, we have done further consultation that has identified the extent of development and the related infrastructure improvements. The applicant has engaged positively with your officers, producing the site-wide master plan as required by policy SP9, which has been independently assessed by Design South East. The master plan demonstrates the suitability of the site with a high-quality design and landscape-led approach. The suitability of the site is demonstrated with the relationship to the existing urban edge of Royston and the delivery of development within a parcel already visually contained by woodland. This master plan approach responds to the topography and the relationship to existing dwellings, positioning bungalows adjacent to existing homes and also with landscape buffers. This will deliver homes for older residents, particularly with respect to affordable housing. The site is well related to the town, and new walking and cycling connections will link to Royston's existing network, connecting to schools and the train station. The close relationship of the site to Royston and its accessibility has been a focus. This has resulted in a strategy of improving the accessibility of Royston for wider residents as well, as recommended by the planning officers and the Highway Authority, encouraging walking and cycling routes in favour of use of the car. New accessible routes will be provided, as well as on-site green corridors that connect east to west across the site. The development will deliver new crossings on Barkway Road, the A10, the town centre gyratory, delivering highway infrastructure that will benefit the wider community. Through these linkages, walking and pedestrian connectivity will be enhanced to the standard required by the Highway Authority and planning policy. This will ensure the future sustainability of the location and enabling future residents to walk or cycle to the train station. The level of open space provided is considered comparable to a new public parkland that exceeds the Fields Interest standards, demonstrating a leisure alternative to Firstfield Heath for local residents. Allotment provision will meet identified shortfalls in the town, alongside play spaces and walking. Landscape boundaries and corridors will effectively green the site and deliver a biodiversity net gain of 26% and an uplift of 57% for hedgerows. This level of open space and biodiversity gain relates to a substantial benefit arising from the development. Through the delivery of this development, Royston's infrastructure will be funded. Through the Section 106 contributions identified, £8.3 million will be focused towards Royston, including £2 million towards highway infrastructure. We have been made aware of the additional request by Sport England, and we will take that on board with your officers' recommendations in terms of SIL compliance. Specifically, infrastructure funding will be provided to meet the needs associated by the NHS Integrated Care Board, delivering expansion to required facilities. Through the scheme design, infrastructure delivery and funding will be provided, and the proposal has been found to be in accordance with local and national planning policy that is up to date, bearing in mind the housing land supply deficit that is in place. Significantly, the presumption in favour means that there are no overriding considerations that outweigh the benefits to be delivered through this development. And I think I just want to add, during the course of the application, the Town Council has been engaged through North Hertfordshire Council Planning Authority in terms of the works to the Green Walk plantation. We would not have included these provisions unless the Town Council had said that they would be allowed if the planning application is supported. And then lastly,
Yeah.
just to address one of the points raised, in the original transport assessment, we assessed all of the linkages and routes to secondary school and the King James School, which identified as a 15-minute route in that original transport assessment. So that was from the original submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Do members have any points of clarification for the applicant? Councillor Prescott.
Thank you, and thank you very much for that presentation. We are looking at an application that has virtually everything reserved except the access, and yet the applicant's presentation spent very little time talking about the points that have been raised continuously this evening. I wonder if I could have a little bit more clarity on the traffic, the impact on traffic through vehicle movements, accepting that some people are going to walk and cycle. I don't think that many, but that's just an opinion. But I do think it's important that the points that have been made this evening about outdated and flawed modelling should be addressed by the applicant now. Thank you.
Is that on? Sorry. Firstly, although we are agreeing access in detail and leaving other matters to be reserved, the master plan that has been presented does offer the council the ability to provide other controls relating to drainage, open space and layout that that's been put forward for years now with consideration from the officers. In terms of the access and the issues that have been raised today by residents and the speakers, these have been reviewed over the time of the application, specifically in terms of the Barkway Road congestion, the works required to improve the gyratory and the transport assessment figures arriving from the COVID-19 surveys. Through consultation with the Highway Authority, we have done new surveys, we have done the traffic impact assessment that the Highway Authority required, and we have produced an assessment that the Highway Authority has supported and has now no objection to. In terms of the existing characteristics of Barkway Road, there is an acceptance in our application and also in the response to the Highway Authority that it is an existing issue that really we do not complicate to a degree that is severe. Originally, including in the pre-application advice I believe we received from the Highway Authority, the Barkway Road congestion is also seen as a traffic calming feature. But
if you can conclude,
yeah, that was one area that was identified through the pre-application advice we received, and that there was no need to address it. There was no way to address it, so our application instead focused on what the impact would be and how we could mitigate and reduce that. So that has been the focus of our submissions.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Emma Fernandez next.
Thank you, Chair. Different subject, really. Thinking more in terms of the tilted balance, and if approval were given to this scheme, how likely is it that it could be delivered within 5 years and actually make a contribution towards the 5-year housing supply required at the minute?
So through the master plan document, we have a drainage strategy, we have a landscape strategy. So we are 6 months away from submitting reserve matters. The only thing that will delay the submission of reserved matters is the additional surveys required, and I believe that we have to do a few more trial trenches in relation to archaeology on the western parcel. We have done extensive trial trenching across the site, where some significant finds are now, I believe, in the local museum. So, you know, we have done a lot of investigations that have informed the master plan, which means we are very close to actually delivering this permission.
Thank you. Councillor Bryony May.
Thank you. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about the consultation that you've done, particularly public consultation, and perhaps give a bit more information about the timeline of that. So, you know, the different time points when the public have had the opportunity to input to your plans, and perhaps give a couple of examples about how the plans have been changed in response to the feedback from that consultation.
So originally, I began consultation on this site in, I think it was December 2022. And that was when the consultations began with the council officers and various departments. That's when we reached out to the town council, to ward members. And then following that, we did a wider public consultation, bearing in mind that we were in COVID conditions. We weren't allowed to do meetings. The local planning authority weren't allowed to meet with us. No councillors were allowed to meet with us. So everything was done virtually. We had extensive meetings with ward members and then undertook a focused consultation in terms of leaflets delivered to the neighbourhood, social media advertising of the development before submission. This then had was our first use of Teams, or rather virtual conferencing, but we did this with local residents so that they could provide feedback. One of their main issues that we took on board from that was the use of the existing public footpaths and the need to really make our development green.
Thank you. Councillor Prescott.
I mean, with respect, I don't want to take the words out of Councillor May's mouth, but the applicant didn't really answer the question. What could you point to any changes that were made in response to feedback through your consultations?
So with respect to the changes that have gone on over the course of the application, through the feedback that has been to the planning application and the original consultation, the relationship to the existing residents in the western parcel, the existing homes, has been amended. So from the initial master plan, we did not propose bungalows there, and then the landscape buffer along that boundary was significantly narrower. Through the feedback from local residents, we lowered the height of the building so that we introduced bungalows, and we also presented a much wider landscape buffer there. This was also because of the feedback about people already using the site in terms of walking along that boundary and wanting to use that and have that use still for their dog walking especially. So that was definitely an amendment that was done in response. Other matters that have been taken on board during the course of the application have addressed concerns about accessibility, drainage, landscaping, specifically the works to the central bridleway. So we have avoided works to the central bridleway in favour of providing parallel footpaths instead. During the course of the application, we have also done further public consultation with additional website and additional works on the highway mitigation. With that feedback, we have just taken that to the council in terms of some of the support letters that we have received, but also the feedback about the routes that we're proposing.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Just want to clarify a few points on this consultation. You mentioned extensive meetings with board members. Which board members were they? What did you mean by that?
Ward members. It was the local ward members that we met with. It was through a number of virtual meetings online.
Well, I am a ward member, and I was at the time, because this was in Royston Heath at that time. I was the ward member. I do not remember ever meeting with you. I don't think that's even true. So and then the next thing I just want to ask is, have you done any in-person community engagement events? Because the pandemic is now 3 years behind us. There's been plenty of opportunity. There are many other developers with allocated sites in our local plan who've done multiple in-person community engagement events in the last 2 years. Have you ever done a community engagement event?
We've attended, I think it was the local ward forum meeting. Representatives of the applicant have attended that. And we've also done door-to-door surveys as part of the most recent consultation.
Okay. Do we have any further questions for the applicant or points of clarification? No. Sorry, switching myself off now. In which case, I'll ask the officer to respond to any of the issues raised.
There was quite a lot of discussion there, Chair. Just maybe some clarifications. I will maybe refer to my colleagues to maybe clarify any outstanding transport-related matters. In the verbal update, we confirmed that there would be a contribution potentially towards cricket to Royston in relation to the mitigation strategy. Just to confirm that the strategy is not part of the development plan. It's a technical document. It's used as a negotiating kind of tool for developers and officers. In this case, we feel that we've reached a balanced view on on-site mitigation and off-site mitigation financial contributions that is fair and reasonable and complies with the SIL regulations. I don't have anything specific to add to that, Chair, but if colleagues feel that there might be some transport matters to clarify.
Yeah, do either of your colleagues wish to add to that? Yep.
I think it'd probably be easier just to respond to any questions from members, to be honest.
So do members have any further questions for the officers? Councillor Prescott.
I think listening to what's been said this evening and reading the reports, my inclination was to suggest we deferred for a more, how can we put this? How can I put it? A traffic survey that we could have more confidence in, that takes into consideration the wider area. But I suspect that the traffic survey that we've been presented with as part of this application, it presents such a rosy picture that if we're not comfortable with what we've got now, if we deferred for another traffic survey, it could only be worse. So I'm inclined to, and I know now is not the moment, but I'm not inclined to support this application. I mean, really, the question I'm asking is, if we had a revised survey, would it actually be more favourable to the application?
Is that a genuine
That's
question?
somewhat impossible to answer. I think maybe to clarify, so some of the points that were raised around the suitability of the modelling that's been undertaken, if I address that point, maybe that helps you. So in essence, the application has used individual junction assessments. LINSIG is the model package it's used, and that's typically used to kind of assess individual junctions, and it's a suitable package to use for that purpose. What's called into question is once you kind of amalgamate multiple individual junctions, whether or not that's appropriate. And the alternative, which was suggested, which is a microsimulation model, would be able to do the activity that you've suggested in terms of modelling the impact of the whole town. However, that wouldn't be a reasonable request to ask of a development of this scale to implement a modelling exercise of that significance. It's a very involved and detailed process. So as a highway authority, the type of modelling that's been used is reasonable for the scale of the application that is in front of us. So we wouldn't be able to require a micro simulation model, which would be extremely expensive to put together, and it would in effect utilize all of the same data and give you an output, but which may well be exactly the same as the one you've got in front of you. Although I would say is that the individual junction assessments are often done in addition to a micro simulation model to properly do the detailed design on individual junctions themselves. So in summary, I would say it wouldn't be realistic to expect the development to do a micro simulation model. So you would only get revised versions of what you've already seen.
Thank you. Councillor Ruth Brown.
I was going to ask if it was possible to request a micro simulation model, and you've said no, but you've talked about the wider area. Would it be reasonable to ask for a micro simulation model of just the traffic coming from Beldham Avenue or the top of the Barkway Road, like Limekiln, maybe Shaftesbury, as far as the gyratory? Could you request a micro simulation of that? Because I think the issue here is, whilst queuing for an extra 2 or 3 minutes may be frustrating and inconvenient, it's not kind of a deal breaker. What is a deal breaker is when you get gridlock and where there's nowhere to pull in, the bus can't get through, no one can move backwards or forwards, and that could happen because there are not enough pull-in points in that stretch.
I think modelling is part of the process in terms of assessing an application. It's one of the tools that we use. So what we have to do is...
Sorry, could you just lean slightly closer to the mic? Sorry, struggling to hear you.
Yes, so it's one of the tools that we use to assess the suitability of a proposal. So essentially what we're being asked is whether or not could we physically ask for a micro simulation model of that length. But the question you have to ask yourself is, well, what are you trying to get out of doing that exercise? We're not saying there is no issue on Barkway Road. What we're saying is, if you consider the impact that this site generates on its own and that is adding to this issue, is it considered to be, in the MPPF terms, a severe impact as a result of that additional traffic? And for us, considering the whole application in the round and balancing all of the mitigation that's offered, in conjunction with the fact that it is a peak period issue that is, in real terms, it's 153 movements. From a highway authority's perspective, we cannot consider that that is going to result in a severe impact.
Thank you for that. I have Councillor Prescott. Do you have a question to the officers?
Councillor Barnes mentioned that it would be this development would represent a 70% increase on the number of properties in that area. If you do not consider that to be significant, can you please tell me what you would consider to be significant? Was that enough of a question?
It's slightly rhetorical, but if the officer would care to answer it.
I think it's potentially unhelpful to consider a percentage increase. What we deal with is the physical number of vehicles that are added to the network and the consequences of that impact. And that's what we're assessing, the residual vehicle impact on the network.
Okay. Do we have any other questions to the officers? Councillor Louise Pearce.
Can I ask a question on another subject, please? We've got in the report that for the purposes of local plan policy, the development will be contrary to SP5 and CGB1, but we also have a tilted balance engaged. Does that mean it is still contrary to those policies? Could perhaps maybe Sean explain that?
Sean, may I ask you to?
Yes, it does mean that it would still be in conflict with those policies. But because we do not have a 5-year housing with land supply and the tilted balance is engaged, the MPPF indicates that those policies most relevant to the determination of the application, that is local plan policies, are out of date. and therefore the application should be considered as against the MPPF as a whole, and the assessment should be against the MPPF. So when we're considering matters such as impacts upon the highway network, the MPPF sets those matters out, and they've been mentioned earlier at paragraphs 115 and 116. And therefore, the main assessment from a planning perspective is whether this development would have a severe impact upon the highway network. The Highway Authority have said, and the Highway Authority are the experts in this area, have said that the impact would not be severe. And therefore, we have recommended approval based upon the fact that in the planning balance, there are matters that weigh in favour of the proposal, and there are matters that weigh against. And those matters that weigh against, in our opinion, do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh those harms, which is necessary when you apply the tilted balance. If that answers your question, Councillor Pease.
Could I just clarify what you've said? So on page 88 of the report, where you have got the effects and weights for the tilted balance, it looks to me as if it's almost even. And the most important one is highways, which is effective harm as moderate. If it's moderate, then that means the tilted balance is in favour of development. If highways and traffic, that becomes a substantial weight, then it is actually tilted the other way. Am I reading this right?
Not necessarily. No, we've assessed the planning balance and come to the conclusion that in applying the tilted balance, the benefits of the development are not significantly and demonstrably outweighed by the identified harms. So substantial weight is given to the benefits of delivering 280 homes, for example, at a particular point in time where we do not have a 5-year housing land supply. There is a clear identified need for houses within the district. We have a significant shortfall in the supply of deliverable housing sites. The 5-year housing land supply is not a ceiling. It's something that you should not go below, and we are below that 5-year housing land supply. And that is why the MPPF applies that tilted balance.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? No. Right. In which case we need to move into debate for the committee. The officer's recommendation is to grant permission. Unless members are minded to propose a different recommendation on this item, along with the material planning reasons for that, I shall be proposing that we grant permission. Unless members have any other proposal. Councillor Prescott.
Thank you. Really just carrying on from that last point, that if a new highway survey identified a more significant impact, more significant harm, I'm minded to think that this application should be, we should be overturning the officer's recommendation and refusing it. And on that basis, I think we either at very least defer for a more traffic survey that we can have a lot more confidence in, or that we just simply vote to reject the application at this stage.
Is that I'm conscious, Brian, is that, are you proposing that? Well, so what are you proposing?
Well, from what I've heard this evening, from what I've read of the report, and also from familiarity, I use that Barkway Road quite frequently, not in prime traffic times, I might hasten to add. I don't think this, I entirely appreciate the 5-year land issue, but one still has to look at the suitability of a location. And I think the point has been made repeatedly this evening, and essentially reading between the lines in the report. This is not a suitable location, purely and simply from the matters that we're looking at this evening, which are traffic and access. So I would propose that we reject the officer's recommendation and refuse the application. Pardon me.
Right, so we have a proposal from Councillor Prescott to reject the application. Do we have a seconder? Sorry. Yeah, I was going to. We need the seconder. We need the seconder first. We will come back for that. Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Brown.
I will second that proposal, and I will reserve my right to speak.
Right. So we have a seconder. Councillor Prescott, I would remind you at this point, if you're going to propose, we act in that way, contrary to the officers, you will need to give material grounds at this stage.
Well, the point I've made at Sorry,
go ahead.
The point I made at previous committees is we have some very experienced, highly professional planning officers in this room with us, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to go into the nitty-gritty of it. But I think the point I've made and the grounds that I've suggested, I'm about to be interrupted, aren't I? But the point I've made and the grounds I've suggested, I'm sure there is a form of words that one of our officers can help me out with.
Stephen.
Chair, could I invite Councillor Prescott to consider, in fact, a proposal to defer as a first vote for the traffic survey, and if that's not agreed, then to go to your proposal to reject?
The purpose of one of the previous questions I asked the highways officer was, would in fact a new traffic survey be more favourable to this application or not? And I think because the problems that are perceived with this, the access, are outside of the development area and effectively outside even the control of the county council to change, that being the Barkway Road issue, I'm not sure that there's any real benefit of deferring, because I don't think it's going to improve the matter. And that's why I'm minded to suggest that we should refuse it.
So, Stephen, Councillor Brown.
I think the point is that I've heard various councillors say that they would welcome greater information as to traffic, and that would only result from further modelling work.
Councillor Brown. Oops.
Thank you. So until we had the answer from the highways officer, I was also minded to defer, but we've been very clearly told that it would not be reasonable to require a micro simulation model. So what are we deferring for? We have to have something that we're deferring to do. And it has to be for more information. And we haven't got that option. We've just been told it's not reasonable to ask for that. So I am minded to continue with a proposal to refuse, and I will say my grounds. The grounds are this site is outside the local plan allocated sites. It is outside the settlement boundary. And if it wasn't for the and I'm going to be political now, if it wasn't for the recent change in December 2024 by the Labour government to make means we now no longer have a 5-year land supply, because before that we would have had a 5-year land supply until 2027, we would not be engaging the tilted balance. I would also like to draw attention to the whole, we've been told it's contrary to all these, under 4.3.36, we've been told it doesn't meet any of the exceptions under SP5. We've been also told in 4.3.34 that There are a number of other sites that have been given permission. I was on the planning committee that approved the reserved matters for Burlows, never been built after 3 years, and we're now back to another application. Hopefully that is in the pipeline, going to come through soon. That's an allocated site. Should we not surely be developing the allocated sites first before considering sites that are outside the local plan? We've got a whole list in 4.3.34, 478 houses allocated for development in Royston that have not yet been built. We should be building those that are allocated first, not those outside the local plan. And so one of them will come forward quite quickly. I think the Burlows one is in process, and there are a few others there. Some of which have already had planning permission but has not been implemented. It has not been built. So that's an issue. Regarding the master planning process, I suppose what I feel about this, the North Herts Council have recently called for sites under our local plan review. Could this not be put forward under the call for sites? Then it goes through a proper examination, hearings and tests for whether it really is a sustainable location for development. It has bypassed that process because it came in too late for the previous local plan. And now, because of the change of the law, and the rules around the MPPF, it can be considered, even though we've got all these sites in Royston that have yet to be developed, and some coming forward across other parts of the district. So the other thing I would like to say is, so the master planning process came in around 2022 and was retrofitted to this site, and I welcome the fact the master plan has been produced, but I would argue that it hasn't been through the same level of scrutiny that other major sites have been through. So other major sites have been to the strategic, which is why I asked about board members and understood that she meant ward members, but there is a strategic sites board which I've sat on for a number of years now, and those big strategic sites, the developers come and present, we ask them questions, they go away, they refine the master plan, sometimes 3-4 times, 5-6 times they present at that board. And then once the board recommends it for approval, it goes to cabinet, then it goes to full council for approval. This here, we're being asked to approve an outline planning application with a master plan without the normal levels of scrutiny. And I think it should have the normal levels of scrutiny. So so those are my grounds. And I think also the traffic assessment is flawed, but I don't know whether we can ask for a new one. So it would be on the ground, those two grounds basically, that the site is not allocated, it's outside the settlement boundary, and that the traffic assessment is flawed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. The only thing that I would pick out is we, as a committee, we can only deal with the legislation and the rules as they stand, not how we would want them to be. Okay. I have a suggestion from our resident lawyer at the present to ask the applicant, did they want to defer the matter rather than it go to a vote?
I do believe that there is some modelling that we can do with the data that we have. So I would prefer to defer and let us do some.
We do it? Yep.
If I may, the applicant's agent has already told us that if in fact there is a refusal, they will go straight to appeal. So in those circumstances, I cannot see any downside in the applicant actually offering to do further modelling to give you and the members of the public either some comfort or some concern that actually this is the wrong site in the wrong place. I hope that's helpful.
So, as it stands, we have a recommendation to reject. Does Councillor Prescott wish to withdraw that proposal?
I can see the logic of what's been suggested. I have to say, in years of sitting on planning committees, I have never seen a situation where an application is potentially within range of being refused, and an applicant has been given the opportunity to withdraw and to resubmit for whatever reason, I think that's highly irregular. I would never question a legal officer because this gentleman clearly knows a lot more about this than I do, but I have never ever seen that. Has this ever happened before?
Before Steve answers, I will merely say, I think, we are here to make a wise decision if we can, and the right decision within the rules that are available to us. But I'll let Stephen define what those rules are.
All I wanted members to be clear on was that if the applicant's agent said that they weren't willing to defer, then of course we would go straight to the vote on a refusal. But I think it was absolutely right that members should be given the opportunity to hear from the applicant's agent that they don't have a right to defer. You have a right to defer if you're minded to do so, having regard to what the applicant's agent has said. So it's not giving the applicant the opportunity to change the ground rules. It's giving you the opportunity to hear what's on offer.
Councillor Mantle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm getting a little bit confused by all this discussion. I would like to bring it back to what I think is a rather more important issue. Am I right that the rules do not permit any development when in the tilted balance, and that one element of that is this site actually suitable for the development that is being proposed? Presumably unsuitable sites can still be rejected on the grounds that they are unsuitable.
Yes, and yes, that's correct. Officers have assessed this over several years, and amendments have been made to the master plan and various other proposals, and officers are recommending approval on that basis. So officers don't consider that it's an unsuitable site for residential development. What I would like to raise is that it's not clear to me at this stage what the reason for refusal would be based upon what I've heard. And
no, it's not.
Our members basically saying that there would be severe impacts upon the local highway network, or merely upon Barkway Road. It's not clear to me what the wording of the reason for refusal would be at this stage. Also, what I'd like to say is that if planning permission was refused on highway grounds, within the background that the highway authority is not raising objection, then it may well be very difficult to sustain such a reason refusal on appeal. The applicants have already indicated an intention to appeal and that they would request a public inquiry. So I'm not asking members to change their mind if they've already made up their mind. What I'm suggesting is members think very carefully about the decision that they are to make. And if, for example, in this case, the applicant has indicated that they may be able to do further surveys and further assessment that may address the members' concerns, or it may not address the members' concerns, but at least the applicant has been given that opportunity before members proceed with refusing planning permission, which may not be sustainable on appeal.
Thank you. I have Councillor Prescott indicating.
Thank you. I think there will be a severe impact on the local transport infrastructure, but Councillor Brown came up with additional reasons for refusal, and I think it might be helpful if Councillor Brown reiterated those reasons for refusal, because I'm not entirely sure that a new traffic survey would actually address all of the problems.
Councillor Brown.
I'll gladly reiterate them. So it's the LP policy SP5 countryside and greenbelt about rural areas and CGB1 rural areas beyond the greenbelt in 4.3.36. There's a whole list of exceptions, and it says in 4.3.37, this proposal does not meet any of these exceptions. For the purposes of local plan policy, the development would therefore be contrary to local plan policies. Now, because of the way the things have changed with the NPPF, these are now considered to be out of date, I understand. But it's contrary to all those policies. We haven't built the ones that are already allocated in Royston. This site has not been through the same scrutiny. It's outside the settlement boundary, outside the local plan. It's not allocated. Those were my grounds. However, having heard what I actually think, having heard what the applicant has offered, I didn't think deferral was a possibility because the highways officer said you can't ask the applicant to do any more modelling. It's not reasonable. But now we've heard that the applicant is prepared to do more modelling. I would be more inclined personally to defer. I think it's a much safer option for everyone.
Oh, my voice went there. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Prescott.
Can I ask the applicant to detail exactly what she is talking about in terms of more modelling? Are we talking about that micro, whatever it was we were talking about earlier on, which is supposed to be very expensive and we can't ask for it? Or will we just kind of top and tailing the existing modelling?
I'm not sure to what extent we can ask the applicant to.
Well, the applicant has offered to.
No, the applicant has offered that they believe further modelling could be done. Until that modelling is done, the applicant can't say what that will result in, but it will give you a better position on which to defend an appeal, because either the modelling will help or the modelling won't help. But you've heard from Mr. Greaves about the situation on an appeal, and to take a deferral at this stage is certainly a more pragmatic way forward, which would allow this matter to come back to you either with information that reassures you or with information which will strengthen the council's position on an appeal.
Right. So we still have in front of us a proposal to reject, which was seconded. Councillor.
God, you really don't want me to talk, do you? I'm on the basis of what's been said in the last few minutes, I'm prepared to withdraw that motion in favour of a motion to defer along the lines that we've now discussed.
1 second. Councillor Brown is the seconder. Are you prepared to accept that withdrawal?
I've already said I am. Yes, I'll accept the withdrawal. Yeah, I will second Councillor Prescott. I believe he's already proposed deferral.
Can we be clear for deferral?
Deferral.
Right. And we have a seconder.
Yes.
Right. So we now have a proposal in front of us to defer the application. Do we have any debate on that? Councillor Winstanley.
I feel a little bit like we're kicking it down the steep access road. And I don't like being over the appeal barrel. But I do agree that this probably legally is the, as you say, the pragmatic way to do it. Yeah, not entirely happy about it, but I think it's probably the right thing.
Any further contributions before we move to a vote? I would merely add, and this isn't a formal proposal, but just a thing, to go back to a conversation I had with Councillor Prescott at the start of the meeting about 3 weeks ago, or it feels like it, that if this does go ahead, there should be a site visit in future, because I think that would have resolved a lot of these issues, as Councillor Prescott said. Right, I'll shut up. So we have a proposal from Councillor Prescott to defer. Sorry. I'm so sorry, Sean.
So
Sean, I'm so sorry.
There appears to be two reasons, therefore, for deferral. One is for the appellant to do further work in terms of traffic modelling and in seeking to provide assurance or support for the modelling that they've already undertaken. And secondly, to enable members to undertake a site visit.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And thank you for the members who pointed me vaguely in the direction of the officer. So, do we know what we're voting on? Voting for deferral on that basis. Can I see all those in favour of deferral, please?
That motion is carried, Chair.
You will not be surprised to know we're going to take a short break at this point. I'd like to say I'm first in queue for the toilet, please, because I've got to come back. Could I thank the members and the officers for bearing with a very long debate? Could I thank the members of the public for being very orderly, pretty well orderly? And I hope that you've seen that the planning committee trying to reach a wise decision within the law we've got. Thank you very much. Good night. And those who are staying, be seated, please, and then we'll. And thank you to the departing officers. Thank you. Officer. Cheers, Edward. We live? I'll stop waffling then. Right. So that was quite a long break. I think we probably needed it. Can I say a particular thank you to members of the public and applicants, etc., for the later items who've sat through all that long debate and break. Thank you for your indulgence. Item 7, application 2401042 FP, land at Churchwood, 3 Houses Lane, Codicott, Hertfordshire. Sean Greaves to present. Sean.
Thank you, Chair. I'm presenting because the planning officer, the case officer, Tom Ray, is unfortunately sick today. I have just one update on this item and an email that has just been handed to me. The email is from a local resident, and she said that should the committee, and the email reads that should the committee be minded to approve this application, a condition must be applied that states that all works cannot be carried out unless the method of working complies with BS 5837/2012, trees in relation to design, demolition and construction. If this is not the case, any permission must be granted with a condition that states we are to be compensated for the trees if they die within 20 years of the development. Compensation to be based on CA VAT valuation. So if we can go to the slides, please. Thank you. So this is the application site. Members may be familiar with this site because an application was considered, well, the neighbouring site, an application was considered just a few months ago. The site is to the south of 3 Horses Lane, and to the west we have Crouch Green Wood, and to the northeast we have Churchwood. The application site is hatched in red. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view of the site. It's looking southwest. The application site is in the centre of that slide, and there are existing buildings to the right. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view looking northwest. The building to the left of that site are the existing buildings, and the application site is in the foreground on the right hand side of that site. You'll be able to see on the later slides where in relation to these buildings the proposal would be. Next slide, please. And that's another aerial view that's looking northeast. Next slide, please. These are drawings of the proposed equestrian building, which includes to the left, it's an L-shaped building. So to the left are the stables, and to the right of the L-shaped building, the right leg is a proposed covered area where horses would be exercised. The covered area would measure 52 metres long by 22 metres wide, and the stable building would be 40 metres long by 20 metres wide, and the building would be 6.7 metres high to the ridge and about 3.5 metres to the eaves. Next slide, please. So this is the location plan, which shows the application site in red and other land in the applicant's ownership in blue. You can see those woods that I referred to annotated on that plan, and the proposed L-shaped building is in that corner of the application site. Next slide, please. And that's an axiomatic drawing of the proposed building. Next slide, please. That's the end of the slides. So the developments in the green belt, and it would utilise grey belt if as set out in the report, but it's considered inappropriate development because it would fail to meet two criteria of paragraph 155 of the NPPF. And those criteria are criteria B and C, that it would not meet an identified need, and C, that it is not in a sustainable location. There are no, in officers' opinions, there's no very special circumstances to justify this inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. There would be harm to the character appearance of the area due to the size and scale of the proposed building. And in the absence of a satisfactory flood risk assessment and a site drainage strategy, the development may give rise to flooding. Therefore, it's recommended that planning permission be refused for the three reasons set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Do members have any questions for the planning officer? Councillor Winstanley.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Sean, for that. Can I just check? I think I read in there somewhere about there being an existing appeal relating to the previous application on this site and possible restoration that may be imposed. So I'm just wondering, why are we sort of hearing this prior to that being rectified?
Yes, there is an existing appeal, but that relates to those buildings adjacent. Yes, if that answers your question.
Yeah, sorry, I just wondered. So, if the applicant is sort of, there are demands on them to rectify things that they may or may not have done previously in relation to the other application, should those things not have been sorted out prior to, it's hard for me to explain, prior to this application coming to us, if that makes sense?
What is before you today is, in principle, the proposed equestrian use on the land edged red, and the proposed building. It's an existing equestrian use of the land, I understand. The building is a large building that's proposed, and those other matters relate to those existing buildings that are on blue land within the applicant's ownership, but not within the application site. And therefore, there would be no reason to delay determination of this application pending a result of any appeal, if that answers the question. Thank you.
Any further questions for the officer? No. Switch myself off again. I should bring the public executor, Mr. Tim Wise. Tim, I'm very sorry. I know it's very frustrating because you wanted to answer the question, but as I said at the top of the meeting, but yeah, you have 5 minutes. I'm sure you can work it in. So you have 5 minutes and I'll let you know when you have a minute left, Tim.
Well, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak against this application, and also for the briefing note thoughtfully provided, reminding participants to restrict their comments to the application itself. Just to answer the question raised about the appeal, my understanding today from PINS, and I'm sure the applicant's agent will confirm, the appeal itself has been withdrawn. I'm Tim Wise, and projector in my own right, and also here on behalf of the Three Houses Lane Action Group. The arguments against this stables and managed development have been well set out by Officer Ray, by 17 objectors to the scheme, by CPRE and by the Herts Flood Authority. Unsurprisingly, we agree entirely with the officer's report and conclusions and urge the committee to support the officer and refuse the application. I would though like to expand on a few points in the report. Firstly, the built form shown on the plan tightly abuts the site's boundary with the Churchwood ancient woodland and other woodland to the south. As such, and as noted by a direct neighbour and landscape architect, the built form is located within the 20-metre root protection zone of the trees, including mature and veteran oaks, in Churchwood, which has TPO protection on site and in adjacent properties. This conflicts with the mandatory British standard BS 5837, trees in relation to design, demolition and construction. A tree survey, arboricultural impact assessment, tree protection plan, arboricultural method statement and construction management plan should have been provided by the applicant to comply with this standard. The trees are also under threat by the activities of stables and a manage, as leachate from manure and horse urine can cause the death of young and mature trees. The protected trees in Churchwood, both on and off the applicant site and in the nearby node, are at risk from an individual and cumulative impact of excavation, compaction, pollution, contamination, flooding, service provision, damage to trunks, bark and canopies. If the council are minded to approve the application, it can only be on the basis that the footprint itself is moved away from the woodland. Secondly, as suggested by Mr. Alley of the Peach House in his objection, these two buildings are not, as the applicant suggests, modest and in-keeping additions on site. At over 1,900 square metres, these are vastly larger than the 800 metres or so of the authorised barns already on site and do not provide any mitigation or buffer zone for any loss of residential amenity. Thirdly, the applicant may argue that these buildings relate to outdoor activities as permitted by paragraph 154 of the NPPF. We would suggest that extensive stabling and a cover managed 7 metres high are clearly not an outdoor activity. The buildings covering as they do an area equivalent to 2 indoor tennis courts. It is worth noting here that 2 of the precedents cited by the applicant are actually for uncovered outdoor manege, which have low or no built form and little impact on the openness of their respective sites. Fourthly, if the applicant is to argue that this is a grey belt site, it is also for them to demonstrate an unmet need for the facilities proposed. That's section B. This they have not done. And indeed, a search of a livery list will show any number of vacancies in Hertfordshire, with the nearest being in Langley, just 2 miles away, and the nearest to the applicant actually in Hemel Hempstead itself. Finally, the applicant has not advanced any very special circumstances to explain why this development should be permitted. To reiterate, we agree entirely with the officer's report and conclusions and urge the committee to support the officer and refuse the application. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Tim. Do we have any points of clarification for the member of public? Yes? No? Right. In which case, I will move to the applicant's agent, Mr. Simon Warner. Simon, you have 5 minutes and I'll let you know we have a minute left.
Sorry, I was just waiting for the clock to update. Just before I start the speech, I was going to say Mr. Wise is correct. The appeal has been withdrawn from the site. The previous use of the site has now ceased. The applicant has now relocated the activities to an alternative site as in the process, and we've provided the council with photos of removing the previous extensions to the building to return them to their previous use. So the applicant's in that process at the moment and found alternative premises as has been advised to the case officer. So I will revert to my speech. The chair, members of the committee, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this application. From the outset, this application has sought to provide a modest equestrian facility in keeping with the rural character of the area. We welcome that the principle of equestrian uses in this area is acceptable, subject to the design and scale. We've listened carefully to the concerns raised by your officer, and in direct response, we've already submitted amended plans, reducing the stables by 23% and the menage by 25%. These are not minor adjustments, and they show the willingness to adapt the scheme. Furthermore, the applicant has made it clear he is willing to consider further reductions. However, this requires greater and more timely engagement with officers. At a meeting earlier this year, officers advised they would set out amendments required to make the scheme acceptable. It took over 8 weeks for these comments to be provided. By contrast, the applicant submitted the revised plans within a few days. We've since formally requested a follow-up meeting to explore the further changes, but this has not been taken forward. However, we appreciate the officer is unfortunately off ill. On other technical matters, the applicant has already engaged specialist drainage consultants to prepare the necessary flood risk assessment and drainage strategy. That work has been placed on hold whilst we awaited the confirmation of the revised scheme from the council to avoid wasting time and resource on information that might be immediately become outdated. This demonstrates pragmatism, not avoidance. It is also important to stress this is not a speculative commercial scheme. The facility is for the applicant, personally, who is a breeder of high-caliber equestrian horses, meeting a significant and recognised need in the UK and internationally. The area is well established as an equestrian landscape with several neighbouring sites already in equestrian uses. The applicant has also secured an agreement with an adjoining paddocks, meaning that land is available that extends beyond the application site alone. We've also submitted a pre-application for the wider site, so we can work with the council to find a long-term amicable use for the site. Taken together, these points show the applicant is willing to commit and be responsive and work with the council for this local equestrian facility, which is now hopefully will become a genuine partnership with the council to shape a proportionate and policy compliant outcome that balances greenbelt protection with the rural economic activity and recreational use. Over half of the riding centres in the UK report they don't have enough horses to meet the demand. There's a specific need for high calibre, leisure all-round horses in demand by both riders and professional equestrians, where the applicant has a track record of breeding. Demand for horses in the UK has surged during the COVID-19 pandemic, driven by increased interest in recreational horse ownership and equestrian activities. As a result, there's a strong demand for quality horses, particularly high calibre animals. I therefore request that members this evening recognise the significant progress already made by the reductions and defer the application to encourage more constructive dialogue with the council for the remaining issues to be overcome, and that the door is not closed on this scheme and the real benefits for the equestrian community are delivered. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or points of clarification for the applicant's agent? Why do I always look at Councillor Prescott? I don't know. Right. No one? Okay. In which case, I will invite the officer to respond to any of the issues raised. John.
I am aware that a revised scheme was submitted, but the officer considered that it didn't go sufficiently to address the concerns raised. However, if members do wish to defer to enable the applicant to make a further revision, then that is a matter for yourselves to decide. But the applicant has indicated a willingness to amend the scheme, but the amendments that the officer received, he indicated to me before he went off sick that they weren't sufficient in his view to address the concerns raised. The applicant's agent has indicated that they may well be willing to go further, but it's a matter for members as to whether they wish to defer decision to enable that process to move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Councillor Prescott.
So for clarity, we're not looking at the proposed amended site. This is the original. Okay. And why was it brought before the committee at this point in time?
The amendments only came forward after the schedule was drafted and produced.
All right. Thank you.
Right. Any further questions to the officer? Nope. In which case we'll move towards debate. The officer's recommendation is to refuse permission. Unless members are minded to propose a different recommendation on this item, along with the material planning reasons, I shall be proposing that we refuse permission. No. Therefore, I propose that we refuse permission for the reasons set out in the report. May I have a seconder? Councillor Fernandez.
Second, Chair, and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. We have a debate. Members. No. In which case we will move to a vote. The proposal is to refuse permission.
That motion is carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. In which case we move to item 8, which is application 25-009-49 FP, land between Shangri-La and Todd's Corner, Stevenage Road, Todd's Green, Hertfordshire. Stephen Graves to present again.
Thank you. There's no update, so if we could go to the slides, please.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Sean. Caroline, I'm so sorry.
I just wanted for clarification to say that I am a parish councillor and ward councillor in Todds Green. I have, however, not been involved in this planning application, nor have I made any public comments. So I just want to declare that.
Stephen, are we happy with that? Yeah, we're happy with that.
Thank you.
Where were we? Sean, I think. I'm so sorry, Sean, if you'd like to continue.
So if we could go to the slides, please. The application site is identified in red on the site. There's Todd's Corner, a dwelling to the north. The building immediately to the north of the red line is actually the garage and fitness room and storage for Todd's Corner. And then we've got Shangri-La to the south. Todd's Corner, the dwelling itself is about 18 metres to the north of the boundary of the site, and Shangri-La approximately 20 metres from the boundary of the site. The site fronts onto Stevenage Road, and as you'll see from a photograph shortly, there's a mini roundabout to the front of the site. Next slide, please. So this is part of the mini roundabout. This is looking at the site from the opposite side of Stevenage Road, and it's looking west. Next slide, please. That's a view within the site, also looking west. You basically popped over that boundary fence to the front. Next slide, please. That's from in the site, looking back towards Stevenage Road and that front boundary fence. Next slide. That's a view looking north with the site on the left-hand side, and you can see the mini roundabout. The access to the site would be further to the north near the boundary with Todd's Corner. Next slide, please. And that's another view along the frontage, looking north towards Todd's Corner. That building you see there is not the dwelling; it's actually a garage and fitness room, etc. An outbuilding to the dwelling. The dwelling is behind it, where the chimney of that building is. Next slide, please. That's a view from the opposite side of the mini roundabout, looking towards the site. Next slide, please. And that's another view looking north towards Todd Corner with the boundary on the left-hand side and the mini roundabout to the right. Next slide. And that's a view in the site looking towards Shangri-La. Next slide, please. And that's a view from within the site looking towards the garage and fitness room and storage building to Todd's Corner. Next slide, please. This is the block plan, the proposed block plan for the site. As you can see from the block plan, there is two dwellings proposed fronting the highway. The access to the site would be towards that northern end, a single access to serve the department with parking to plot 1's to the north, plot 2's to the south. There's parking to the side of plot 1 and parking for plot 2 would be to the front of it. You can probably just see those little outlines in light blue. That's the bin storage areas. I think in the next slide will probably show better the landscaping. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So this slide is the landscaping. It shows a boundary hedge proposed to the front. At the moment, this is a post and rail fence rather than a boundary hedge. And to the rear, there is an area that's designated as landscaping to achieve the net gain in biodiversity. Next slide, please. And this is the site access plan. I don't know if you can see it, but there's red dotted line along the frontage that shows the visibility display, and there's nothing to impede the visibility displays at that access. Next slide, please. That's the site location plan. That shows the site in red and other land that the applicant owns in blue. You can see that it's an infill site with dwellings to the north and dwelling Shangri-La to the south. Immediately to south of Shangri-La, there's a small industrial estate with small industrial units in it. And off the site to the south eastern corner, you go into Stevenage, and the rest of Todds Green develops there. There's a new development along there with a notorious fence along the A1. I always remind people it's not in North Arts, it's in Stevenage. Next slide, please. This is front elevation. This is a street scene, actually, of the elevations. The dwellings have been are proposed in a kind of Edwardian arts and crafts style, with gables to the front and various materials, including timber boarding, timber framing, brick and render. Next slide, please. And these are elevations of and floor plans of the dwellings. They're 5-bedroom dwellings with the 5th bedroom in the attic. That's plot 2, and which is the one to the south of the site. And the next slide, please. Very similar, but in a mirrored form, is plot 1. Next slide, please. That's the end of the presentation. So as far as the scheme is concerned, it is located in the Greenbelt, which is considered to be an infill site. It is grey belt, and we have assessed it against paragraph 155 to ascertain whether or not it's inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, and also against paragraph 154. And in assessment against both those paragraphs of the MPPF, we considered that it is not inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. And the report obviously also refers to the effect upon neighbours and the effect upon the character of the area. It's been assessed against those matters, and officers considered that there would be no significant harm. Therefore, the tilted balance applies to this site, and officers are therefore recommending that planning permission, on balance, planning permission should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Winstanley. Dave.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sean, for that. Can I just clarify the definition, or it being designated as grey belt? Does that is that reflected because of the infilling argument? And if so, how does infilling in a hamlet? I understand there's a difference with infilling in a village and infilling in a hamlet, and I understand this is a hamlet, not a village. If you could clarify or expand on that, please.
The consideration as to whether it's utilises grey belt as the fact that it's an infill site has no bearing upon that assessment. The assessment as to whether it's in grey belt is against whether it would strongly contribute to certain purposes of the green belt, purposes A, B, and D, and assessing against those purposes. For example, it's not going to extend a large built-up area, as an example. We assessed it against the purpose of the big green belt under the provisions of the MPPF and came to the conclusion that it's grey belt. That's not the end of the story, though. Even if it is grey belt, you then have to assess it against paragraph 155 of the framework, which sets out 3 criteria. Of those criteria, we've considered that it complies with all those criteria. First criteria is that it's grey belt. The second criteria is that there's an identified need for the development. And we do not have a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore there's an identified need for the housing development. And finally, that it should be in a sustainable location. It has got good access to public transport, for example, and you can cycle, for example, into Stevenage. It's quite close to Stevenage, and so it's considered to be a sustainable location. So it meets the provisions of paragraph 155. So even if it wasn't an infill site, or if there was dispute about whether it's a village or an hamlet or whatever, it complies with paragraph 155 in any event.
Thank you. Dave, did you want to come back?
Yeah. If I could just come back. So can I just clarify that? So the 5-year housing supply, I think I know the answer to this, it doesn't discriminate as to what type of houses are being built. So the housing supply just says you haven't got a 5-year housing supply and you need to have one, regardless of the fact that these are 5-bedroom executive homes.
There's a need for all forms and size of housing. There's a need for larger housing as well as small houses. There's more pressing need for smaller housing in certain parts of the district compared to other parts. But there's a general need for all types of housing. These are 5-bedroom homes. If it was a much larger scheme, we'd be asking for a much more greater mix of development, but it's just 2 dwellings. And therefore, there's no issue with them being 5-bedroom dwellings. They fit comfortably on the site. There's space within and around the dwellings, so it wouldn't be considered overdevelopment due to the scale. And there's no reasonable reason to resist them just because they're 5-bedroom dwellings in this instance.
Thanks, Sean. Councillor Prescott.
Thank you. I don't have any particular problem with this development. I can see all the points that are made in the report. Can I just ask one question, however? On one of your slides, or in fact a couple of the slides, I think the landscaping one, it was most clear. The pathway between the 2 houses that heads towards the biodiversity bit at the back, would that theoretically could possibly be used in future as an access route to more houses that would appear on the field behind or on the bit of land behind?
Would you like to bring up the slide so we can have a
Yeah,
look?
if you wouldn't mind. I didn't want to put officers on the spot there, but
So if we can look at one of the layout plans.
right. Okay, so that one there, the driveway between, or the pathway, whatever it is, between the 2 houses that leads to the bit of landscaping at the back, it seems inordinately wide. And my question is it being designed that way as a means to potentially provide access to another couple, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses that we will see an application for in the future on the land behind, which also belongs to the same owner?
I couldn't possibly comment. We can't make decisions on applications based upon an assumption of what someone might do in the future.
No.
We only have to consider what's before us. What's proposed here is 2 dwellings. It does have a gap between the sites, and there was a reason for that gap from what I understand. The concern has been raised with regards to it infilling a gap within a substantially built-up frontage, and the scheme retains a gap to retain a view between the dwellings to the land to the rear. So that, I understand, was the main purpose, and that is a reasonable purpose for that. We can't make any assumptions that an applicant may have aspirations for the future. What we can consider now is what's before us, and there are benefits from that gap in terms of enabling a view through those dwellings to the open land to the rear.
Thank you.
Councillor Tyson. Tom.
Thanks, Chair. Sean, thanks for explaining about paragraph 155. I thought you were going to answer my question as you were doing that, but you stopped short, I think, because I've got a 4th criterion in my notes here, which is part D, golden rules contributions. And I was just going to ask if you could explain to a simpleton like myself what that means.
Yes. The golden rules relates to major development, actually, and with regards to the golden rules for major development, it basically relates to delivery of 50% affordable housing. Okay. This is not major development, and therefore the golden rules don't apply to this application.
Councillor Claire Billing.
Mine was sort of leading on a bit from what Councillor Prescott was talking about, the land at the back. We just talked about there being no need for social housing or affordable housing because it's only 3 properties. If the landowner, because I remembered you said that all that land is owned by the same owner, did bring forward a new application for another 2 houses and another 2 houses and then another 2 houses, would he never have, or would they never have any need to do any affordable housing?
The answer to that is no. We would look at it cumulatively in relation to land ownership. That is a wheeze that many developers have tried in the past to use, and you don't look at the individual site. We know at this stage that the applicant owns the application site and the blue land, and therefore any future applications that may come forward, and they may not, would be considered in the light of that cumulative growth in this site. And so there would come a point when if they, for example, proposed a total of 11, once you come to the 11th, every further house, we would probably be seeking affordable housing after that, up to a total of 40% is the current requirement. So in answer to your question, it is not, doing it cumulatively is not a means of avoiding delivery of affordable housing.
Thank you. An interesting answer and an interesting question. Councillor Bryony May.
Thank you. They're 5-bedroom houses and they look quite big. I mean, they obviously need to be quite big to have 5 bedrooms in them. How does the maximum height of the buildings compare with the surrounding buildings?
The actual street scene plan, which was shown earlier, does have some kind of indication in relation to Shangri-La to the south and Todd's Green, Todd Green to the north, and they are of a similar height to those dwellings. There might be a slight difference. It might be slightly higher, but not noticeable given the gaps between them.
Councillor Winstanley.
Thanks, Chair. Following on from Claire's very good question and the very good answer, I like the idea of the view, that channel for a view, if that's what it's for. I do like that idea because it is a nice view behind there. Is it possible to apply any kind of conditions to that strip that to prevent it from being used as a vehicular access at any point in the future?
I don't think such a condition would be reasonable or necessary because it wouldn't be a vehicle access isn't proposed. I was thinking on my feet here. Thank you very much. I don't think such a condition would meet the test. I don't think it's necessary. There's nothing. If obviously the owner of the land came forward with an application for dwellings to the rear, we would consider that. Having said that, the form of Todd's Green is linear in form, and we'd take that into account in the event that such an application were to come forward. But I don't think there's a need. I don't think it would meet the test of necessity, such a condition, in terms of preventing any access or hard-standing access road to land to the rear. I don't think such a condition would be necessary.
Okay.
But if members are minded to impose such a condition, then that's for you to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I have no further questions. So at this point, I get to be Councillor Griffiths for a couple of minutes. Councillor Dominic Griffiths called in this application, was unable to attend tonight to present his reason for calling. However, he's prepared a written statement which I will read on his behalf, as allowed under the Planning Control Committee speaking scheme. But you don't get to ask me any questions. You might not agree with the answers. Right. So this is Dominic's statement. The land is greenbelt unless the committee redesignate. No very special circumstances have been demonstrated to allow the development on the greenbelt. No infilling is allowed as it is a hamlet, not a village. The particular land allows through views which provide the hamlet with wide open and distant country views. It is the only place in the hamlet in which you can view the countryside. There is some risk of adjoining properties being overlooked and the street scene being diminished with parked cars. The location of where the buildings would be also mean that a new road entrance has to be created next to the roundabout, which in my view would not be feasible. So that was Councillor Griffiths' contribution. But you can't ask him any questions. So we will move on to the applicant's agent, Mr. Scott Moore. Scott, you have 5 minutes and I'll let you know you have a minute left. Your floor.
Before I start, I think I should probably just fill in a few bits of information for you. The pathway there is because we have to provide BNG, and biodiversity net gain cannot be provided in a garden. It must be provided on a separate piece of land, and that separate piece of land must also have access for maintenance, for landscaping, for equipment to get to it, because it has to be kept like that for 30 years. So that's why the access is there. If the applicant had wanted to put in for more houses, he could have done it at the beginning because it's grey belt. He could have put in for 4 or 5. It happens to be that the applicant lives next door and probably wants to see particularly nice houses next to him. Using the access as well for housing, that wouldn't be possible because that access wouldn't be good enough for refuse trucks, and the carry distance for people that would be exceeded. Fire engines wouldn't get up there. But more importantly, there is an existing access already there, which we are utilising. That existing access, the site could have been developed completely differently to have more houses on there. And just to come back on the officer, is quite right. We'd be looked at cumulatively and also on size. We'd only be able to do 10,760 square foot or 9 dwellings before we had to provide social housing. So that is the reason for the pathway, and that's the reason why it's there. The comments that you read out, the chairman wrote out, no VSCs in this type of application for grey belt or for infilling, VSCs wouldn't be necessary. And just to know infilling as a hamlet, we don't make the rules up. Stevenage Borough Council, as well as North Herts Council, have already approved applications in Todd's Green because it was regarded as a village. This has already happened, and it seemed to be a bit obtuse to be going against your own council and another council regarding that. If I could, then my name is Scott Moore, and I'm speaking today in support of the application on behalf of the applicant, and I do thank you for letting me speak. I'm speaking today in support of this planning application for 2 new homes in Todd's Green. This is an important opportunity to deliver much needed homes in a sustainable, sensitive and well-designed way, complementing the rural setting of Todd's Green while meeting local housing need. We fully recognise the importance of protecting our green belt and the principles that underpin it. However, we believe that this proposal represents a carefully considered, proportionate and sustainable form of development that respects both policy and local need. Firstly, the location. This is not an isolated site in open countryside. The land in question is directly between existing dwellings, creating a natural and logical infill opportunity. Development here would not extend the built form into the wider countryside, but would simply complete the line of existing frontage. Indeed, as set out in the committee report, we are in agreement with the planning officer's conclusion that the proposal would be limited infilling in the village and thus appropriate in the green belt. Additionally, and again as set out in the committee report, the application site meets the definition of grey belt, and the proposal would therefore be compliant with paragraph 155 of the framework, insofar that the council are unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of land for housing and the site is in a sustainable location. Accordingly, the proposed development would be appropriate development in the green belt on this basis. Secondly, the proposed development has been designed in order to ensure that proposed dwellings would integrate sensitively with the surrounding and prevailing character within this part of Todd's Green. The house has been very carefully designed to match with the Edwardian character of existing dwellings in the immediate vicinity and would ensure the homes reflect the local vernacular and enhance the continuity of the street scene rather than detract from it. Third, the need, as members will be aware, North Hertfordshire continues to face significant pressure for new housing. Delivering small-scale, well-located homes such as these is part of meeting that challenge in a responsible way. These houses would contribute to local supply in a manner that is appropriate in association with a small village such as Todd's Green. And for these reasons, we respectfully ask the committee to look favourably in this application. It is modest, sensible, and a sustainable proposal that is appropriate in the green belt, respects local character, and makes a contribution to meeting local housing need. We would respectfully ask members to support the officer recommendation and grant approval so this scheme can move forward. And I thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Are there any points of clarification from members? No. And then can I invite the officer to respond To any issues raised?
Nothing to respond. Thank you.
Thank you. And do members of the committee have any questions for the officer, Ruth Brown?
Yes, I just wanted to know what the distance was from that mini roundabout to the access to the site.
Okay.
And rough, I mean, it's just because it was raised by in one of the objections.
Just bear with me.
Sorry, I know it's a bit detailed.
Yeah. Okay.
I know highways haven't objected, have they? So they presumably think it's okay. Is this?
About 15 meters.
What you said? You just said 15 meters. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry about the technical detail.
Okay. Any further questions for the officer? Okay. In which case we'll move into debate. The officer's recommendation is to grant permission. Unless members are minded to propose a different recommendation on this item, along with material planning reasons, I shall be proposing that we grant permission. Pausing meaningfully here. Okay. Caroline McDonald.
So on the basis that no very special circumstances have been demonstrated to develop on Greenbelt according to the 155, whatever it is, I would urge us to reject and not approve this. But I don't think I'm going to get a second up.
So, may I ask, is there a seconder for the proposal to reject? Or my proposal to, well, I'll move that next.
I'll second yours.
Let's do Councillor McDonald's first. Is there a seconder for the proposal to reject? Right, then that falls. In which case, I should revert to my position to propose that, in line with the officer's recommendation, we grant permission. Do I have a seconder? I think Councillor Tyson.
Yes, I'm happy to second that.
We're in debate. Does anyone wish to discuss? Councillor Winstanley.
Thank you, Chair. I do think it's a bit of a shame that these nice areas of greenery within villages or hamlets default's not quite the right word, but applied to be covered by infilling. There aren't many other, as objectors and other people have said, there aren't many bits of greenery left in this village with views like this. So I do feel like it's a bit of a shame that the sort of default is, oh, okay, we can build on it then. But 5-year land supply, and barring any legal reasons, I think I will be voting for this. But I do feel like it's a bit of a shame.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor McDonald.
So just to reiterate reasons that I will not be supporting this is that it is a piece of land that is the only piece of green belt left in this hamlet. With Spurberry, with Stevenage West, etc., that are encroaching and coming right up to Todd's Green, it does seem a really, really big shame that this land is going to disappear. It's not a particularly busy area in the day. It is in peak traffic times. 2 cars perhaps coming out of this entrance is not going to be an issue with that roundabout. It is going to change the feel of the village. It is going to block that wonderful view from a lot of houses through that gap. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Councillor Claire Billing.
I will be supporting this proposal, but I do just get really frustrated that we seem to have a lot of luxury homes that most people in the village won't be able to afford. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other items for discussion? Rather, Councillor Tyson.
Yes, I've seconded this because I think that, in terms of planning legislation, we haven't really got a choice. And I would say that I am hugely supportive of green belt and the preservation of as many green spaces in villages as possible. And I really think that the grey belt notion is a very sad development in planning law. And that notwithstanding, we've got to follow what that law is. And that's where we are with this, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any other comments? No. In which case, we have a proposal duly seconded to follow the officer's recommendation and grant permission. Can I see all those in favour?
That motion is carried, Chair.
Right. So the final item was to be item 24-01994 S73 land between Royston Road and Cambridge Road, Barkway. That item has been withdrawn from the agenda. I'd like to say it was very complicated as well. So that's been withdrawn. So we move on to item 10, which is appeals. Sean Greaves to present. Sean.
Thank you, Chair. There's no appeal decisions to report. The only thing I've got to report is that we've had 2 appeals lodged. They're both modest applications. One's for written representations, which relates to that item 9 that was withdrawn. So the appeal has been withdrawn in relation to that. So that first one is no longer an appeal before us, and the second one is just a household appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. So I'm assuming there are no questions to the officer. Oh, there is. Blimey. Martin.
I'm a trifle confused. They've withdrawn the appeal and they withdrawn the application. Are they just giving up on changing these conditions or what?
The answer to that is no. They've withdrawn the appeal, and therefore the application is deemed to have been withdrawn. We did do some investigating into that matter. So when you withdraw an appeal against a non-determination, you effectively withdraw the whole application. There's nothing for us to consider, basically. They will be submitting a further application, Section 73 application, to vary the conditions in due course.
Can I just, on that particular matter, and I don't want to prolong the agony of this meeting any further. I shouldn't use that expression. I've used that before and I got told off. I'm sorry. Condition 9 is the one on that application that everybody gets really excited about. Has there been any talk of them applying to have that condition 9 varied, removed? You know the one I'm talking about.
Not as far as I'm aware. My understanding is that the Section 70 of the application would be for the very same conditions that were the subject of the application that was withdrawn, effectively.
Excellent. As I have said, it was very complicated when we discussed it earlier in the week. So, Chair. That light is
I was-
on and off more. It's like
I
it did
can't
go
go
ahead.
indecisive. I couldn't. I wasn't sure because I've missed quite a few planning meetings. Whether we'd had a discussion about the Ray Spring and the affordable housing and what the implications were. It's all done. Okay, I missed it. Shame.
Quite. Yes, you will insist on having a holiday. Well, Sean's report was for noting, so we duly note it. And I close the meeting. The next meeting of the PCC is on the 18th of September. I look forward to seeing you all.